Chapter 325. Returning to Su Manor. 25. Su Luo had gone insane. She actually dared to directly call His Highness Prince Jean by his given name. That was a taboo. Moreover, she also used that kind of arrogant tone that sounded quite disdainful. She actually dared to use this kind of attitude to speak to His Highness Prince Jean. Simply did not want to live. Just a moment ago, Su Zian had viewed Su Luo in a new favorable light. Now, he was itching to beat this daughter, who had just popped up to death. He had said it before, not well-mannered enough to bring out in public, just could not be brought out in public. She didn't even understand a little bit of etiquette. Su Zian immediately kneeled on the ground in reverence and fear, and kowtowed to beg for forgiveness. Your Highness, please calm your anger. Su Luo, she is ignorant, her mind is not very bright. Normally, she is always erratic and uncivil. She doesn't think before she speaks. Your Highness, you must by all means not lower yourself to her level. Su Zian was begging for forgiveness on one hand, while on the other hand, he wished he could directly strike Su Luo dead. This pest of a spirit that harmed people. Did she not know that very possibly just because of this sentence, in an instant, the entire Su Manor would be a bloodbath? Su Zian saw His Highness Prince Jean had no reaction since the beginning, couldn't help but to take a furtive look towards him. But he only saw that remote and aloof His Highness Prince Jean, that was always calmly drinking tea, with an uninterested expression that lacked any emotion. It was as if the matters taking place around him had nothing to do with him. Seeing this, Su Zian's mind became even more anxious. He lifted his hand, grabbing towards Su Luo. Loathsome girl, why haven't you already quickly kneeled down to beg for forgiveness from His Highness? Who knew that this grab of his would actually come up empty? Then when he lifted his eyes to look, he found that now, he had already lost sight of Su Luo's figure. At this moment, Su Luo had already moved to Nangong Liuyun's side with her quick steps. This high and mighty person towering above very unhappily glared down at her. Su Zian, upon seeing this, could only feel his mind darken. It was a scorching thunderous lightning that exploded, splitting open his brain. Oh heavens! This loathsome girl simply was leading Su Manor directly on the road to extinction. She actually still dared to stick her hands at her waist and glower at His Highness Prince Jean. At this moment, it was not only Su Zian, there was also Su Jingyu and Madame Su kind of people. They were all looking at Su Luo with a dumbfounded expression. Rays of extreme fear flashed through their eyes, because this action of Su Luo's in their eyes appeared to be simply too brazen, too disgraceful, and too much like courting death. Su Wan pushed Su Luo with a very displeased expression. Why did you come over here? The one His Highness Prince Jean fancies is me and not you. Get lost. Saying this, Su Wan very rudely lifted her palm to slap towards Su Luo's face. Su Luo casually extended her hand. Effortlessly and with great ease, she captured Su Wan's moving hand. She cast her a quick glance with smile that was not quite a smiling expression. Someone just like you, Nangong Liuyun, would actually fancy you? Su Wan, don't forget, the you right now is a fallen woman. Oh. Your body was already sullied by another man. Oh. You. Su Wan was extremely angry. This matter was something she could not bear to recollect. Now, it was laid bare and revealed in front of everyone by Su Luo. Su Luo, it was you, right? That affair was you who did it, right? A crazy malicious radiance shone from Su Wan's eyes. On that day, that killer was clearly going to your courtyard to rape you, this slut. However, finally, in an unfathomable mysterious way, he appeared on top of my bed. Furthermore, you know martial arts. You obviously knows martial arts, and not at a low level either. It was you, clearly it was you. Su Luo, you slut, you ruined me. I want to kill you. Even if Su Wan was not completely right, but her guess was pretty close. On that day, it really was Su Luo who had set up that maneuver. It was also Su Luo who had reversed their roles and drugged her. At this moment, Su Wan's rage was difficult to manage. She was making threatening gestures to Su Luo, and was about to claw at Su Luo's face. But now, her martial arts ability just couldn't be compared to Su Luo's. Therefore, Su Luo easily and effortlessly flung her away, as if throwing away a coarse sack. Chapter 326. Returning to Su Manor. 26. Su Wan was flung to the ground. It hurt so much tears were about to come out of her eyes. However, her hatred had already blinded her eyes. She knew that the her right now was no match for Su Luo. Moreover, the her right now had already broken away from Su Manor. Therefore, Su Xian and his people simply would not stick up for her again. What to do? No, she still had Prince Jin. His Highness Prince Jin would help her. She was already His Highness Prince Jin's people now, wasn't she? He would even bestow such a precious medicinal pill to her. Why wouldn't he help her again to kill such a little minor person like Su Luo? As a result, Su Wan didn't have time to deal with the pain. Crawling and moving towards His Highness Prince Jin, she complained tearfully, "Your Highness, I beseech you, help me kill Su Luo, that little slut. As long as you kill her in the future, regardless of what you want me to do, I am completely willing. I beg you to help me avenge this hatred." Su Wan wept like a pear blossom in the rain. Right now, she truly had some delicate fragile beauty that made the heart of people watching feel tenderness towards her. However, it was a pity she was wrong. She was wrong from the onset, moreover she was outrageously wrong. Alas! Nangong Luyan finally put down the teacup in his hand. His gaze landed on Su Wan's body light as a feather. His intoxicating pair of eyes carried a touch of a smiling expression, seemingly ridiculing and mocking. He leisurely repeated what she said. "Kill Su Luo on your behalf?" Su Wan thought that His Highness Prince Jin had already agreed. Immediately, her grief turned into happiness. "Many thanks to your Highness. Many thanks for your Highness's help to accomplish this." After she was finished thanking His Highness Prince Jin, Su Wan immediately turned her head around and sinisterly stared at Su Luo with a cold and malicious smile said, "Little slut, you will die for sure." Indeed, people that His Highness Prince Jin was set on would always die very tragically, quite inhumanely. Both of Su Luo's hands were holding her arms, and with a faint smile, she cast sidelong glances at Nangong Luyan. "Oh, His Highness Prince Jin's charismatic beauty really is limitless. In the beginning, I heard people say you had deep feelings for second elder sister, and that it was serious. Afterwards again, rumors spread that you were infatuated with fifth younger sister. Now what's this? You won't even let Su Wan, a fallen woman, slip by?" Hiss! Everybody at the scene inhaled a cold breath of air. Brave, too brave, simply full of bravery. This absolutely was the #1 bravest person since the beginning of history. This absolutely was the first time since the beginning of history that someone dared to speak like this to His Highness Prince Jin. Su Xian saw Nangong Luyan slowly stand up. His heart was extremely plaintive and aggravated. Finished, Su Manor was about to be done for. However, Nangong Luyan's movements afterwards surprised him until his chin almost dropped to the ground. He only saw that remote and aloof godlike Nangong Luyan smilingly rub Su Luo's head. "Oh, this King's Luo girl is jealous, really hard to come by." His Highness Prince Jin's devilishly charming voice also carried a touch of tender sentiments. That tone clearly had hints of a spoiling, indulging and conniving expression. In addition, there was also his ecstatic address of her as this King's Luo girl. At this moment, in all directions around it was quiet. It was so quiet that the people watching could hear the sound of each other's heartbeat. This was because this situation was really too strange, so strange that everyone was incredulous. They were all staring outrageously at the couple in front of their eyes, who were like a pair of jade annulus. However, what made them even more stunned was what was still to come. They only saw Su Luo directly step on his foot. Her tone was ice cold as she said, "Who is your Luo girl? In your dreams? Humph, you are such a womanizer, attracting the bees and butterflies, one on the left and another on the right non-stop." Su Luo, she stepped on His Highness Prince Jin's foot. It was absolutely the truth, because on His Highness Prince Jin's black leather boots, there was clearly a distinct mark of a footprint. His Highness Prince Jin that was just stepped on, this time ought to get angry, right? Everyone present all looked towards His Highness Prince Jin expectantly. Su Luo deserved to die, too deserving of death. She actually went and stepped on His Highness Prince Jin's foot? Could it be that she didn't know? The thing that annoyed His Highness Prince Jin the most greatest and utterly was when someone stepped on his foot, okay? Chapter 327. returning to Su Manor, 27. However, against everyone's expectations, His Highness Prince Jean didn't get angry at all. His Highness Prince Jean not only didn't get angry, on the contrary, he even smiled dim-wittedly. His face was full of happiness and bliss. Yes, that's right, it was exactly a blissful, happy and silly smile. This smile appeared on the face of His Highness Prince Jean. That was like Yama, the king of hell, ice-cold and unsympathetic. Moreover, his voice clearly carried a thread of currying favor with her, and a trace of childishness, acting like a spoiled little boy. This King's Luo girl has just felt jealous. Just listen to the words he said, simply too childish. People who heard this almost had goosebumps. This basically was not that savage and callous His Highness Prince Jean, that was from their impression. Clearly, he had completely changed into another person. However, Su Luo still hadn't bought into his act and unrestrainedly, she directly sat on the chair he was just sitting on. She took the teacup, and before she could pour the tea, His Highness Prince Jean had earlier already grasped the teapot, and proceeded to politely pour the tea for her. His voice was extremely gentle and tender. The tea is somewhat cold, drink less of it later. This king will personally boil tea for you to drink. Su Luo snappily glared at him. Again, you want to tempt and coax me to go over? Definitely not listening to your deception. Where would I dare to deceive you? How about this king carry you over in a palanquin with 8 bearers? Nangong Luyan smiled roguishly while moving closer to her. Dream on, you move away from me. Su Luo glared at him, and she pushed him away from in front of her eyes. The two of them acted as if no one else was present, going back and forth in a tit-for-tat. This was how they would normally interact with each other. However, in the eyes of the people nearby, this was too much of a shock. This was already something that words could not be used to describe. Su Zian unwaveringly stared at the two people in front of his eyes, who seemed to be chatting about trivial things. His brain went blank and was frozen. It seemed as if his thought process had forgotten how to keep turning. Su Jingyu had his mouth open wide, so surprised that he was simply godsmacked. Madame Su's pair of eyes flashed with malicious rays. The embroidered handkerchief in her hand was nearly torn to shreds. The eyes Su Qing used to look at Su Luo had a deep and cold killing intent. The one who found it hardest to accept was really Su Wan. She already didn't have Su Manor as a way out. The only person she could rely on for support was His Highness Prince Jean. But now, His Highness Prince Jean was exchanging flirtatious glances with Su Luo. However, just a moment ago, she had clearly asked His Highness Prince Jean to go kill Su Luo. This simply was. Now, the complicated mood in Su Wan's heart simply could not be described by words. She merely thought that she was about to go insane. No way, His Highness Prince Jean was hers. She absolutely could not let Su Luo snatch him away. Absolutely would not permit it. Su Wan, staggering along, climbed up from the ground. From the hair on top of her head, she pulled out a sharp, thin hairpin, and directly stabbed towards Su Luo's throat. Slut! I want to kill you. Su Wan was aggressive and her eyes had a malicious and crazy light. With her disheveled hair, she looked somewhat malevolent and terrifying. However, without waiting for her to get closer, when Su Luo still hadn't reacted, Nangong Luyan directly flapped his sleeves and swept Su Wan far away. Bang! One could only hear a violent crashing sound. Su Wan's entire person was gravely flung into the wall. The strength was so great that almost the entire room was shaking. Under normal circumstances, it's only correct that she ought to slide down along the smooth wall. But, since it was His Highness Prince Jean that acted, it just wouldn't be that simple. One could only see that His Highness Prince Jin's strength had actually directly made Su Wan smash into the wall, forming a person-shaped deep indentation. Su Wan simply could not even fall down. Her entire person, in that manner, hung on the wall. Cough, cough, cough. Su Wan repeatedly coughed. One mouthful of blood after another burst out, seemingly as if it doesn't cost money coming from her mouth. After directly vomiting out more than 10 mouthfuls of blood, she was barely able to stop it. Chapter 328. Returning to Su Manor, 28. Now, Su Wan's complexion was as white as paper. It seemed like she had only a flimsy thread of breath left, and she looked exceedingly weak. It seemed possible that with the very next breath, she would die. Nobody dared to step forward to lift Su-won down from the wall. First, because it was His Highness Prince Jin who had acted, and second, it was because Su-won had already broken away from the Su family. So as far as they were concerned, she was only an outsider now. For what reason? Su-won weakly opened her mouth to ask. While she was speaking, another mouthful of blood violently sprayed out. A loud thump sound rang out when her body tumbled to the floor. She almost passed out due to the severity of the pain from the fall. Nangong Liuyun's gaze was lazy and devilishly charming. He cast an indifferent sidelong glance at her. For what reason? Your Highness is treating me like this. Just a moment ago. Didn't you say? I am your Highness's woman. Su-won's pair of eyes stared fixedly at Nangong Liuyun. Her breath was feeble as she stared at him. Just now everything was going well. But ever since Su Luo appeared, everything changed afterwards. Nangong Liuyun started to laugh softly. His pair of peerless black eyes was completely apathetic. When did this king acknowledge you as this king's people? Well, what? Did His Highness Prince Jin actually never acknowledge this point? It was not just Su-won. Almost everyone present was stunned as they stared at Nangong Liuyun, who was pulling Su Luo to stand by his side. A sarcastic arc arose on his peerless, handsome face. That's right, thinking back, a moment ago, it was only Su-won who was saying those words by herself. In fact, from start to finish, His Highness Prince Jin never did acknowledge her. But your Highness also never denied her claims either. For what reason would he do this? Recalling His Highness Prince Jin's conduct and deeds towards Su-won just now, everyone felt was somewhat weird. Finally, it was still Nangong Liuyun who helped clear up their confusion. And in passing, letting Su-won become an enlightened ghost. Nangong Liuyun, whose position was high above, looked down with a penetrating gaze that radiated an ice-cold light. He smiled with not quite a smile while lifting an eyebrow. Before, the water that you drank was especially sweet, am I right? Su-won was bewildered as she looked at Nangong Liuyun with uncertainty. How could His Highness Prince Jin even know of this? Could he have cared about her this much? Nangong Liuyun smiled sinisterly and charmingly while continuing his explanation. When you sleep, it's especially deep and you always have nightmares, am I right? Su-won had a startled expression as she stared at Nangong Liuyun. Obesity poison, said Nangong Liuyun with clear, bright and mesmerizing obsidian eyes. His black pupils that concealed a hawk-like gaze were sharp and cutting. He continued with the confidence of his convictions, as if everything was his by right. That was the elixir that this king had dispatched people to secretly poison you with. What? The person who poisoned Su-won was actually His Highness Prince Jin? Why would he do this? What hatred did he have for Su-won? Wasn't directly killing her the same? Why would he torment her like this? Everybody was terrified and awed by this admission. Su-won was immediately stunned stupid. She would never have expected that it was actually His Highness Prince Jin who poisoned her. Furthermore, he also revealed this news in a tone that was as if it was right and expected. For what reason? Before this, she basically had never really seen His Highness Prince Jin, let alone having offended him. Even if she had offended him, he could just have her killed directly in response. Why would he waste so much effort to arrange this? For what reason? Nangong Liuyun smiled faintly. Such a forgetful Mississippi. Could it be that you forgot the matter from before of going to the mercenary union to issue a task? The matter of issuing a task? Su Xian's eyelids jumped at that time. Hadn't they suspected Su Luo for issuing that task? Why was it that now, in a blink of an eye, it had changed into being Su-won? In the end, how was this matter related? His pair of malicious eyes was tightly fixed on Su-won, trying to find any clue on her face. Now Su-won's eyes shrank back, cowering in fear. She didn't expect that this matter would actually be known by His Highness Prince Jin. Chapter 329. Returning to Su Manor, 29. But what I issued was to have a man rape Su Luo. Yet towards you. Su-won's gaze slid down, and saw that his large palm was holding firmly onto Su Luo's hand. Suddenly she was shocked. Could it be that His Highness Prince Jin was taking revenge for Su Luo? Oh heavens, but this was impossible. How could the stately and majestic Prince Jin take revenge for that Su Luo, who was a good-for-nothing. This kind of trivial matter shouldn't even enter his judicious eyes. Alas, such a pitiful child. Nangong Luyan sighed. A rolled-up paper flew out from his sleeves and smashed on top of Su Wan's head. He understatedly said, "Take it, examine it well. This is the method you are about to die from." This sentence of death from His Highness Prince Jin's mouth was as simple as eating food or drinking water. Even the venerable Bei Qining had received his proper punishment. How could a lowly person like Su Wan escape? People that were involved in this matter, except for Bei Qining, were all without exception ruthlessly dealt with by Nangong Luyan. Su Wan was trembling and simply did not dare to open that task form sheet. It was something she had personally signed. How could she not know what was written inside? At that time, they wrote 3 copies of this agreement. One copy was filed away in the mercenary union, another in the hands of the killer, and the final copy was in her own hands. She had already destroyed the copy in her hands long ago. This copy now should have been seized from the mercenary union. The venerable Bei Qining from the mercenary union was His Highness Prince Jin's people. If she had known earlier that Su Luo and His Highness Prince Jin had something to do with each other, she would never have gone to the mercenary union. No matter how you said it, it was thousands and tens of thousands she should not have. She should never have set herself against Su Luo. A clear line of remorseful tears rolled down Su Wan's face. With a trembling voice she said, "Your Highness Prince Jin is very calculating, laying down such a great scheme. First, you made me utterly isolate myself by having my name struck off from the family genealogy records. Subsequently, you proceeded to tell the truth about this matter, making me suffer so much pain and grief that I would be better off dead. Very brilliant strategy. Since that obesity poison was put in place by His Highness Prince Jin, then that medicinal pill. This medicinal pill will make your body send out a rare perfume, even after your death, so your corpse will still be very alluring. Well, of course, only as far as magical beasts are concerned." Nangong Luyan held his chin in a contemplative posture, saying the truth in a manner that was full of good intentions. That's right, after death, her corpse must be torn apart by magical beasts. Not upon until even the skeleton would be gone. This was indeed what she wrote for this task. Su Wan recalled up to here. She then immediately fainted from fear and despair. Drag her away. Carry it out according to the original plan. Nangong Luyan carelessly waved his hand. Immediately, a bodyguard came forward from among the guards at his back. Like a fierce tiger, he rushed toward Su Wan. He carried her over his shoulder and in a flash, he had already left Su Manor, darting towards the vast, great mountains. Su Manor, the reception hall. When all the people present saw Su Wan being carried away, without exception, they felt chills down their spines. His Highness Prince Jin had deep thoughts and planned ahead. He handled matters as he pleased without the slightest scruple. Moreover, his methods were cruel and bloody. People simply could not bear to see it. He clearly could have just straight out killed Su Wan, but he would not. He insisted on planning it step by step, making Su Wan experience again and again the despair of going from heaven to hell. Only after he finished playing did he let her know it was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, making sure that even after death, she would not be able to have an intact corpse. Su Zian only felt that he couldn't keep his lips from trembling. This kind of Prince Jin was simply too terrifying. However, his gaze stopped and fixed on the hand His Highness Prince Jin used to hold Su Luo. This time ought to be the real one, right? Truth be told, Su Zian was already scared silly. From Su Qing to Su Shi, from Su Shi to Su Wan, and once more from Su Wan to Su Luo. His Su Zians, for daughters appeared one, followed closely by another, only to be rejected one after another. Chapter 330, Playboy 1. Su Luo really never thought that Nangong Luyan would go to this extent just for her. Since the beginning, he had set up this scheme to trap Su Wan, advancing step by step, and trapping her more with every step. First, he had let her reach heaven, and then he threw her down from such great height. Following that, he once again lifted her up to the heavens to once more threw her down from that great height. She was half dead from falling the second time, and only then did he tell her the truth. Afterwards, he made her face the way she was about to die while she was still alive. She was a nobody, yet among the population, he would actually go to this extent just for her. People were not vegetables. If one were to say that Su Luo's heart wasn't a little bit moved, that would be impossible. Nangong Luoyan glanced back and saw that Su Luo looked dazed as she gazed at him. Her pair of eyes carried an affectionate regard. A touch of joy flashed across his face, and with a spoiling and indulgent manner, he hooked the tip of her nose with his finger. This king's little princess is really moved this time, right? You should be reassured that after our marriage, this king will treat you even better. Do you believe me when I say that I will spoil you to the sky? I don't believe it. Su Luo snappily glared at him. How could this person be so thick-skinned? Then you should marry this king and try it. Nangong Luoyan used a wheedling, childish tone while tugging at Su Luo's little hand. His face was covered in a pitiful expression. Not going to marry you. Su Luo shook off his hand. Nangong Luoyan's face had a wounded expression, and he looked at Su Luo with some recrimination. Such a heartless girl. We have already shared the same bed. How can you be like this and not take responsibility? Once these words were out, the people in Su Manor who had originally been gaping blankly at their interaction were all once again dumbfounded. The 3 veins on Su Luo's forehead bulged and pulsated. She quickly turned her head around and glared at Nangong Luoyan. She bit down hard on her teeth and stressing every syllable to say, I demand that you shut up. She just knew it. She just knew that he would not let last night's matter be so easily swept under the rug. However, she never would have thought that this shameless guy would actually do this under thousands of pairs of eyes, and in front of everyone's face. Saying this kind of words, what was called sharing the same bed. They had merely been covered in blankets, and were simply chatting, okay? What was called taking responsibility? Had she really done anything to him? The little her in Su Luo's heart was about to be driven mad. Nangong Luoyan would never be satisfied with small gains. His moist, glossy, liquid-like red lips were alluringly hot. His bright, limpid, peach blossom-like eyes looked at Su Luo with reproach. The accusation in his eyes was so obvious. It made people feel like Su Luo was a bad woman that had arbitrarily used him, then had indiscriminately discarded him. Su Zian was nearly shocked with disbelief. He looked at the scene in front of his eyes with a shocked and stupefied expression. No matter how he looked at it, he couldn't believe it. No way, no way, no way. How could this man that was feigning pitifulness to get some sympathy be His Highness Prince Jean? That evildoer. Absolutely not him. It was absolutely impossible. Su Zian got his act together, then let out a slight coughing sound. Your Highness Prince Jean. Without completing the sentence, he had interrupted the Nangong Luoyan, who was in the midst of brewing an affectionate mood. His eyes coldly swept towards Su Zian. It was like blocks of ice which had successfully condensed for millennium. Immediately, the last part of the sentence that Su Zian had wanted to say froze in his throat. He was unable to say another word. How extremely complicated was Su Zian's mood in his mind right now? Only he would know. All these years, he had always regarded Su Luo as a good-for-nothing. He never once cared about her one bit. However, in the end, he would never have expected that His Highness Prince Jean, whom he had tried very hard to curry favor with, would actually treat Su Luo favorably. No, not merely treating her favorably, His Highness Prince Jean was spoiling and indulgent towards Su Luo, to the point of having no bounds. He was almost at the point of seeing, hearing and obeying her to whatever extent she desired. Only was this real? Or was this merely another scheme of His Highness Prince Jean, wanting to deceive other people, and putting on this false facade? Su Zian had no choice but to have this kind of suspicion because of self-doubt. Because just a moment ago, that series of events was sufficient to prove how enigmatic His Highness Prince Jean was, with entirely unpredictable mood swings. Chapter 331, Playboy 2. Since the start, Su Qing had stood quietly aside, watching the melodrama unfold with ups and downs, then the complicated twists and turns of this great play from start to finish. In this play, she was the very first one to be kicked out, becoming an eliminated cannon fodder. She was discarded so cleanly that there wasn't even a speck left as a remainder. Before, no matter if it was at home or at her teacher's place, she was always the star that everyone revolved around. There never was anyone who could steal the spotlight that belonged only to her. Even by the person considered to be courted by His Highness Prince Jean, it would also be out of the question. She could not allow herself to be insulted like this. All the pride she had in her body since birth would absolutely not allow her to bow down her head. Looking at Su Luo, a killing intent flashed through Su Qing's beautiful eyes that were clear, tranquil and cold. Su Luo, I challenge you. Within the quiet hall, Su Qing's ice-cold voice drifted out, carrying an icy arrogance that would absolutely not tolerate rejection. The first person to react was Su Zian. Just a moment ago, he was still immersed in a beautiful dream that he wove himself. Now all of a sudden, he heard these words from Su Qing, and immediately, his eyes jumped and he loudly chided. Qinger, what nonsense are you talking about? Quickly shut up. Because of His Highness Prince Jin's concern and care for Su Luo now, her position had shot up immediately. Who dared to move against her the slightest? Did you not want to live anymore? Su Zian was angered beyond reason by Su Qing. Su Qing paid no mind to her father berating her. Her ice-cold gaze merely remained fixed on Su Luo, like a poisonous snake biting down tightly and not letting go. Life and death duel. Su Luo, do you dare to accept this challenge? She had simply gone insane. Su Zian was furious to the point of nearly being hopping mad. He rigidly glared at Su Qing, with one hand slapping towards her. Life and death duel? The two of you are flesh and blood sisters. Why speak of a life and death duel? You want to die? I will help you accomplish this right now. Not even mentioning that Su Luo was now being shielded by His Highness Prince Jean. Just this information alone, if it were to spread out, would immediately turn them into a laughingstock in the entire capital. To what degree had this hatred reached? So they had to use a life and death duel among sisters to end this hatred. This was the reason why Su Zian, without further ado, rejected the demand. Even though the corner of Su Qing's mouth was bleeding from Su Zian's slap, her gaze was still as cold and dark as a poisonous snake, unwaveringly fixed on Su Luo. Stressing every syllable, she said, Su Luo, do you dare? If you refuse, then you simply are not fit to receive His Highness Prince Jin's affection. You are a coward. You are unworthy. Today, she was repeatedly refused, ridiculed and humiliated. This was the greatest shame for Su Qing since birth. Now she must use blood to purge this shame. Otherwise, this would become the greatest devil in her heart for the rest of her life. In the future, when she would get caught by the devil in her heart, she would not be able to make any progress in her cultivation. Nangong Liuyun's sword-like eyebrows nodded slightly. His ice-cold phoenix eyes swept towards Su Qing. He opened his mouth and said frostily, If you want to die, do not be anxious. This king will help you accomplish this. Su Zian's heart jumped up violently for some time. If His Highness Prince Jean wanted to kill someone, that would be simply like being marked for death by Yama the King of Hell. No one would be able to escape this. Su Zian once again pulled back his hand to slap at Su Qing's face. His furious voice bellowed, Quickly shut up. People come, drag Su Qing away and lock her up. Su Qing's mouth hooked into a sinister, fierce sneer. Her gaze unblinkingly stared at Su Luo. You coward. Su Luo, basically you are just a good-for-nothing. Waste. Idiot. Coward. You are afraid of me. You simply could not defeat me. Ha 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 ha. Su Luo knew that Su Qing was using insults to push her into a rash action. If she was clever enough, she could totally hide behind Nangong Liuyun's body and let him handle Su Qing. Right now, she could rely on Nangong Liuyun, leaving aside whether she could afford to repay him for this favor or not. But if she did that now, in the future could it be that whenever she come across someone stronger than herself, she would need to rely on Nangong Liuyun? For all of eternity? However, the assassin side from her previous life told her, when relying on a mountain, the mountain would collapse. Depending on a person, that person would run away. Nobody could be more reliable when compared to herself. Chapter 332, Playboy 3. In this world where the strong rules, she must constantly become stronger and continuously exceed her own limits. Only this way would she be able to stand among the forest of the strong. And then stand at the summit of the strong. Su Luo had both arms crossed in front of her chest. Her gaze was frigid and she lightly swept Su Qing a glance. Life and death duel? Su Qing, did you not get it wrong? Life and death duel. Once you stood in the ring, if one side did not die, then no winner could be determined. Even if one side admitted defeat, it was still no good. This was a battle where if one person did not die, it would never end. Therefore, it was only for deep enmity and great hatred. Otherwise, basically no one would lay down a life or death condition before entering the ring of a life and death duel. And yet, the first thing out of Su Qing's mouth was a life and death duel, not leaving even a little bit of leeway for the opponent. It could be clearly seen how deep the resentment and grudge in her heart was. Su Qing's voice was as cold as ice, chilling through the bone. You didn't mishear what I said. I really want to set down a written challenge for battle. A written challenge for a life and death duel. Do you dare to accept it? Scoff. Nangong Luyan uttered a derisive sound. A fourth-rank martial artist issued a written challenge for a life and death duel to a third rank, and even in such a courageous and righteous manner. Indeed, very interesting. Speaking of which, you felt no shame in suggesting this out loud. However, even this king felt ashamed just listening. Nangong Liuyan's remark, these words, immediately made Su Qing's face turn very red. She resentfully and ashamedly turned her face away. Finally, she let out a cold snort and merely glared at Su Luo. Do you dare to accept? Don't dare to accept, then don't accept. Su Luo faintly smiled. What's so hard about accepting it? But I have a condition. What condition? Su Qing never expected that Su Luo really would dare to accept. A touch of astonishment flashed through her eyes, followed closely behind by her urgently asking, afraid they would be interrupted by others. This battle must be set to 3 months later. 3 months, with the assistance of medicinal pills and crystal stones, her cultivation would absolutely go up another level. The present her still have too large of gap from Su Qing. She wanted to give herself a chance. She thought to test to what degree her cultivation could progress under the force of these kind of circumstances. 3 months. Su Qing sneered repeatedly. Good, then just after 3 months. Su Luo, I'm really looking forward to your performance. 3 months. Could it be she still believed that in a period of 3 months, she would be promoted from the 3rd rank to the 4th rank? Really ridiculous. Even if she really finally got promoted to the 4th rank, then again, so what? At that time, she would have already reached the middle, or maybe the peak of the 4th rank. In the same manner, she would still effortlessly and easily eliminate her. As for His Highness Prince Jean, that hurdle, humph, His Highness Prince Jean was again not a forever dedicated kind of person. A 3-month period was enough for him get tired of playing with her. At that time, maybe he would still praise her that she did good. Nangong Liuyan's sword-like eyebrows nodded coldly. He took a quick, annoyed glance at Su Luo. However, Su Luo shook her head at him. The arrow was already drawn on the bow, so she had no choice but to shoot it. Su Qing had put forth the life and death duel in front of so many people. If she didn't accept it from now on, her days would be an unbroken succession of public attempts to kill and assassinate her. Since they were all battles, then why shouldn't she just set a time? Within this period of time, she should strive very hard to cultivate, right? Nangong Luyan coldly snorted in his heart, but very quickly, he smoothed out his eyebrows. Humph, humph. If at that time Luo girl didn't have the odds to beat Su Qing, then he would personally undertake the task and directly kill Su Qing just like that. Why would there be so much wasted words? Having thought up to here, Nangong Luyan felt relieved soon after. Su Qing and Su Luo's life and death duel actually made Su Zian extremely anxious. On one side was Su Qing, whom he normally doted on and held in high regards from before. On the other side was Su Luo, who rose abruptly because Nangong Luyan fancied her. This made things exceedingly difficult for him. Returning to her courtyard, Su Luo contemplated if she should have Lu Luo test at the spirit testing temple. After all, Lu Luo was always very loyal. In the future, Su Luo's cultivation would continue to rise. If Lu Luo was to make no headway in her cultivation, then in time, She would not be able to keep up with her footsteps. Chapter 333, Playboy 4. The result from the spirit testing temple made Su Luo very satisfied. Because even though Lu Luo's talent wasn't very good, it was also not too bad. She was actually a green-level talent. Nangong Luyun was afraid Su Luo would have an accident, and assigned Ling Feng to come over and guard her. Su Luo conveniently handed Lu Luo over to Ling Feng, and shut herself in her room. She started to single-mindedly practice and cultivate. She remembered that blackish bronze plaque she won from Lu family's old man. At that time she had immediately tossed it into her space. Coming back was another huge pile of different things that kept her busy until now, when everyone finally dispersed. As a result, she hadn't had an opportunity to carefully study it until now. Su Luo retrieved that blackish bronze plaque from within her space. Placing it in her hand, she turned it around to examine it. The outer appearance of this bronze plaque, besides the few illegible and flamboyant handwritten words, she completely could not tell what was inside it that was so special. Su Luo recalled that piece of jade the venerable divine dragon gave her. At that time, she had poured spirit power into it, and afterwards, she was able to see the cultivation methods sealed inside. Could it be that this piece of bronze plaque also used the same method? Sure enough, when Su Luo closed her eyes and poured her spirit power into the blackish bronze plaque, a group of densely packed written words immediately emerged in her mind. With a careful look, it actually was the cultivation method for spirit dance steps. As expected, the first condition to cultivate this was exactly what Nangong Luyun mentioned previously. Innate spirit power must reach the purple level. Otherwise the vigor of the mind basically was not strong enough to master the spirit dance steps. Within the notes, Su Luo actually saw such a sentence. If a space master was to cultivate this, there was a multiplier effect. Finally, they might also cultivate the spirit dance steps to the realm of teleportation. The realm of teleportation? Su Luo was immediately stunned. If she was able to cultivate to the realm of teleportation, then that speed could be said to have reached the pinnacle. When the time came, who could possibly catch her? Thinking up until now, the corner of Su Luo's mouth hooked into a nefarious smile. Spirit power at the purple level she had. The nearly extinct space mage on this continent she was. This spirit dance steps was practically created just for her. There wasn't another cultivation method that was more suited for her to practice. The most coincidental matter was that the Lu family's elder ancestor had actually voluntarily come to her door and personally delivered it into her hands. Recalling how Elder Lu looked after Nangong Luyun successfully oppressed him, the smiling expression on Su Luo's face became even more obvious. But very quickly, she collected herself and regained her resolute expression. 3 months' time. Could she really cultivate to the 4th rank and fight to see who was stronger? According to the information she obtained, first thing in the morning, Su Qing had already gone back to her teacher's sect. In this 3-month period, don't know to what state Su Qing's cultivation would be promoted to. Su Luo very quickly tossed Su Qing to the back of her mind and started her own cultivation practice. The first layer of the spirit dance steps, speeding up. She must expand the range of the handprint of the great dimensional imprint, increasing its power by 10-fold. The small fireball technique must be cultivated to the large fireball technique. As for the wood system, Su Luo felt that this was of little value and was weak. Granted, even if she was to cultivate it to a high level, the wood system relied on plants in battle, and its fighting strength would not be too great. Therefore, she didn't plan to cultivate it as an auxiliary force for the fight. After all, right now, her main fighting force and technique was the great dimensional imprint. Her auxiliary fighting force was her fire element system. She also had speed from spirit dance steps. As long as she combined it well, then its formidable power would be very astonishing. To torture and kill a 4th-rank martial artist was also not impossible. Su Luo sat in the lotus position on her bed. Then she took out some spirit liquid medicine that she had successfully refined from orange-colored crystal stones. She poured a few drops into her mouth, placed both hands on her knees and tightly closing her eyes. She allowed her body to slowly absorb the pure essence from that potent medicine. And under the permeation of the orange-colored spirit liquid into her body, Su Luo's dantian started to expand and strengthen bit by bit. In the following month, Su Luo became a recluse. She rarely walked out of her room. All the time she had was employed on her cultivation practice. Chapter 334, Playboy 5. With her forgetting to eat and sleep in her dedication to cultivating, then adding in the unending stream of crystal stone spirit liquid's assistance. Even though she hadn't advanced to the 4th rank, the result she obtained was still very astonishing. First of all, the small fireball technique was the very first to break through to the large fireball technique. Its attack power compared to before had been upgraded by as much as 5-fold. The great dimensional imprint, while it still hadn't reached the boundary of the 2nd layer, the handprint was however a lot larger than before. Its might had also risen quite a bit compared to before. Yet the boundary of the 2nd layer, no matter how much Su Luo cultivated and tried to sense it, she was unable to set in motion the spirit force in her body. She thought that the reason might be because her strength was too low. If she was to run into Lu Qingfeng again right now, she would absolutely be able to dominate in defeating him. And no longer would it be like last time, when she had to use medicinal pills, to still fight very exhaustingly for her life. As for the spirit dance steps, Su Luo, after tumbling down countless times, finally touched the doorway. Within this period of time, most of her time was spent on practicing the spirit dance steps. The more she practiced it, the more she felt the footwork was exquisite, peerlessly appearing as graceful as an immortal. Merely just considering the speed alone, nobody within the 3rd rank could match it. Originally, she had just entered the beginning of the 3rd rank, but after 1 month of trying hard to the point of going without sleep or meals, she had already reached the middle of the 3rd rank. This kind of cultivation speed, if others were to find out, would absolutely make people insane from jealousy. Within this month, when Su Luo got tired of cultivating, she would just run over to refine medicinal pills. After refining medicinal pills, she would once again run back to cultivate her spirit strength. She would repeat this cycle nonstop in this way. Not only had she refined many medicinal pills simultaneously, her ability in refining pills had also advanced by leaps and bounds. What was even more significant was that her wood and fire dual elemental systems also followed after in growing by leaps and bounds. In summary, through this month's bitter practice, her harvest was very huge. In her space, Su Luo sat cross-legged by the side of the spirit spring with her eyes tightly closed. A fine layer of sweat seeped out of her face. Su Luo, in the course of her cultivation, even she herself didn't notice a circle of spirit power rushing around her entire body. Finally, following her breathing, it quietly entered into her body. It was constantly nourishing her internal organs. After a month of cultivating during which eating and sleeping were forgotten, Su Luo had now already reached a bottleneck. The originally soaring growth of spirit strength had also become slower. In addition, those dozens of crystal stones that she had refined into spirit liquid had also been almost completely consumed by her. Time to go out. Su Luo opened the tightly secured door. Outside was the harsh and dazzling sunlight. "Miss, you came out." Seeing Su Luo walk out, the most excited person was none other than Lu Luo. Su Luo faintly smiled and nodded her head. "How did your cultivation practice go? Is there any progress?" Before, she had let Lu Luo drink a cup of celestial spirit water to help her get rid of the impurities within her body. Soon after, she also tossed her a few bottles of crystal stone spirit liquid. On top of getting the services of an expert like Ling Feng free of charge. If Lu Luo still hadn't made a little progress, then she would really give up. Lu Luo's entire face was covered with a huge smile. Her pair of eyes were bent into a crescent moon shape. She excitedly nodded her head repeatedly. "Yes, yes, yes. This servant is now already a first-rank martial artist. I feel exceedingly good. Oh, truly, even in my dreams. This servant never expected that one day she would also become a martial artist." On this continent, it was clearly stipulated that a martial artist's position in society, compared to that of an ordinary normal person, was at a higher, more noble level. In addition, after becoming a martial artist, you also have the basic strength for self-protection. No wonder Lu Luo would be this excited. Ling Feng's stiff face that appeared to have nerve paralysis noiselessly appeared in front of Su Luo. He expressionlessly cast a glance at Su Luo. In an ice-cold tone he said, "His Highness has arrived." Sure enough, in the wake of his words, very quickly, Nangong Liuyan's figure appeared in front of Su Luo. Chapter 335 Playboy 6. Under the Chinese snowball viburnum tree, the petals of the cherry blossoms which were as white as snow fluttered down, sprinkling the ground. Nangong Liuyan was dressed in a black brocade robe. The tassels on his jade belt wantonly danced gently in the wind. His face was like the month of the Mid-Autumn Festival, smiling lightly again and again while looking at her. The him right now appeared to be respectable, roguishly charming, handsome beyond compare, and full of hidden depths. He had that kind of extreme allure that was a little flaky, but gave off ample aggressiveness. The sun in the sky was just at its most magnificent. The plants in her courtyard were blooming. The scene was very picturesque, making him appear so handsome that it was as if he just walked out of a painting. This King's Luo girl finally came out from closed-door practice. Nangong Liuyan gazed deeply at Su Luo and said in a teasing tone, "If you hadn't come out now, then this king was about to enter by smashing the door." Saying this, he reached out to hold Su Luo's hand, and without regard for others, he probed her cultivation. The Nangong Liuyan before her had an extremely good-looking smile on his face. That kind of smile made people feel dazzled, as if all of a sudden, the sky looked magnificent and splendid with a warm breeze within thousands of miles. It was incomparably brilliant, as if all the air she inhaled was exceedingly fresh and clean. She was merely in seclusion for a month. Why was it that it felt like it was a lifetime ago? It seemed as if it had been a very, very long time, and was as if she had missed him just a little bit. Su Luo became aware that she was looking at Nangong Liuyan, as if her mind had gone blank. She couldn't help but to inwardly curse at herself. "Were you waiting for me to come out of seclusion from the start?" "Why?" Su Luo looked at him and puzzledly asked. "Haven't seen each other for 1 or 2 months. And this king is not allowed to miss you?" Nangong Liuyan hugged her full and slender waistline, as if the action was expected, and was a matter of fact, of course. The corner of his mouth had a smile. Not coming earlier is not as good as coming on time. Luo girl is really the #1 blessed person under the heavens. The word timely is the one you are rushing to catch. Su Luo became increasingly more confused. Could it be that today was some huge day, really? Why was it that she didn't even have the slightest impression of this? What timely coincidence? Su Luo looked at him with a perplexed expression on her face. Nangong Liuyan didn't answer her. He only drew her along by the hand and stole a kiss from her. Seeing Su Luo's expression becoming annoyed, the corner of Nangong Liuyan's eyes and the tip of his brows had a smiling expression, like a child that had successfully stolen some sweets. It seemed as if he was in a very cheerful mood. "Let's go follow this king to our tryst." A tryst? An unnatural expression flashed across Su Luo's face. She tried to shake off his hand that would not let go. "Who has a relationship with you? Did I promise to go? Quickly release my hand." A tryst, when applied to a woman and a man, how ambiguous a way it was to word things. This word would define the relationship between both sides. And it was very obvious that no matter how Nangong Liuyan defined their relationship, she still hadn't reached that degree with him. Nangong Liuyan's footsteps paused, his cold, clear eyes swept across her body. Before she could return to her senses, that ice-cold, beautiful pair of eyes invoked a smiling expression that was alluring and would entice anyone who saw it. Wanting to resist but still welcoming, "Girl. As if this king still doesn't understand you? Let's go, stop dilly-dallying." Rubbish talk. Su Luo showed that she was not convinced. What was called wanting to resist, but still welcoming? How could she have this kind of intent? Nangong Liuyan rather seriously and earnestly examined her. "Want to promote your cultivation and defeat your opponent, no? If you want to, then follow this king and let's go." Su Luo saw his raised eyebrows and lips and the still deadly earnest, old-fashioned, solemn appearance. Suddenly, She felt he looked extremely ridiculous. She couldn't bear it, and let out a sound of laughter. Nangong Luyan extended his slender, jointed forefinger, and immediately knocked her gently on the head, rewarding her with a quick knuckle to the head. What are you laughing at? Laugh at this king again. I will sell you and count the money. You would be loath to part with me. Su Luo blurted it out without giving her brain enough time to think it over. Once the words were out of her mouth, after coming awake and becoming aware, she then found that it was improper. According to her and Nangong Liuyun's relationship, this sentence seemed a little ambiguous. Chapter 336, Playboy 7. Nangong Luyan was as quick as using a stick to hit a snake. He immediately lifted an eyebrow and looked at her with a faint smile. He smoothly responded to her sentence. Luo girl really understands this king. Like you said, this king really would be loath to part with you. Su Luo had lost this round, and somewhat annoyedly patted her own head. She really had become foolish since being shut in, to forget Nangong Luyan, that roguish nature. She even walked into that trap. Su Luo helplessly sent him a glare. But Nangong Luyan still appeared improper, and hugged her slender waist tightly to him, bringing her to the front of his body. However, Su Luo shook off his hand. After that, she took a step and walked forward while ignoring Nangong Luyan. Nangong Luyan rushed to catch up, and walked alongside Su Luo. His tone was extremely fawning and cordial. Okay, you are already this king's people. Why are you still so easily embarrassed? This king doesn't mind. Why would you care? Su Luo was just about to retort her refusal, but when she recalled how thick-skinned and shameless this guy, Nangong Luyan, could be, she endured it. Su Luo merely focused on continuing to walk forward. Going to ignore him? Ignore him. The more attention she paid him, the more enthusiastic he became, and so on without end. Nangong Luyan fawningly tugged at her little hand. Su Luo, with one toss, shook him off. With her face turned away, she cast a glance at him. I am not interested in you. Nangong Luyan also didn't get angry. He smiled alluringly with a devilish charm. He leaned close to her, persistently giving her his selling points. Such a hard-mouthed girl. It's obvious you like this king very much, but insist on saying you are not interested. Humph. Let me tell you, this king is the kind of outstanding, elegant, handsomely suave, who knows literature and martial arts, and that shunned debauchery to remain chaste, exceptionally good type of man. Even if you lit a lantern to find one, you still won't find one this good. Let me tell you, from now on, you should be careful and constantly be mindful of me, else this king will be snatched away by others. When Nangong Luyan was boasting, his tone was full of himself, and conceited with a high-spirited expression. It seemed as if he was not the slightest bit embarrassed. His words struck Su Luo like lightning, making her speechlessly shake her head. This person was His Highness Prince Jin. His Highness Prince Jin, the legendary, unwavering, expedient killer that killed people like cutting grass. His only hobby was to cut off people's hands and feet, and was bloodthirsty like a devil king. Now he had this kind of childish manner, simply made her want to cry but lacking the tears. And even more, he was hard to handle. Su Luo halted her footsteps, supporting her forehead. She sighed. I beseech you to stop talking. You may not be embarrassed, but I feel ashamed on your behalf. Nangong Luyan gave two humph sounds. You don't have good vision, girl. This girl was really hard to swindle. No matter how he tried to swindle her, he couldn't deceive her. In the end, Su Luo was still very curious. Therefore she followed him, and together, they approached the dragon-scaled horse. Today's dragon-scaled horse was not harnessed to the rack of a carriage. Rather, it had a saddle on its back. It heroically stood at the doorway, looking gorgeous and vigorous. Seeing Nangong Luyan and Su Luo approach, the dragon-scaled horse immediately abandoned its own master, and jubilantly tried to move closer to Su Luo. Its massive head incessantly rubbed into Su Luo's embrace. Nangong Liuyun's face darkened as he tore the dragon-scaled horse away from Su Luo, and directly carried Su Luo onto the horse's back. I can do it myself. Su Luo pursed her lips and smiled. This man would even be jealous of the dragon-scaled horse. He really was very interesting. In fact, She was aware of why the dragon-scaled horse wanted to be close to her. Last time, when she took the dragon-scaled horse carriage back, Su Luo took out a little celestial spirit water and fed it to the dragon-scaled horse. Originally she did it as a test, to see whether besides the little divine dragon liking the celestial spirit water, other magical beasts would also like it. Who knew that only a few mouthfuls of celestial spirit water would get the dragon-scaled horse to be on her side? The dragon-scaled horse's attitude towards Su Luo immediately underwent a huge 180-degree turn. Since then, the dragon-scaled horse would follow behind her, but anytime to anywhere. Otherwise, it would use those pair of limpid, bright and huge eyes to look at Su Luo pitifully. Just seeing it would make a person's heart hurt. Chapter 337, Playboy 8. Now it was also like that. Nangong Luoyan held Su Luo and sat them on its back. The two of them rode together in the same saddle. They were very close to each other. Su Luo tried several times to say that she could ride a horse, but was diverted away from the topic by Nangong Luoyan changing the subject. At this moment, the dragon-scaled horse refused to move. He continuously turned his head to rub against Su Luo. Even Nangong Luoyan was somewhat unable to command it. When Su Luo saw Nangong Luoyan's dark face, she secretly laughed in her heart. She bent her body and leaned down with her hand, offering the dragon-scaled horse the celestial spirit water, and fed it into the dragon-scaled horse's mouth. After the dragon-scaled horse drank, its eyes narrowed in an appearance of enjoying something. Now can we go? Su Luo smilingly stroked its head. This gluttonous child was really the same as the little divine dragon. The dragon-scaled horse docilely licked her hand. Then it let out a neighing sound, and both of its pair of hooves leaped and darted away. Its speed was simply at the peak like a whirlwind, as if it was intentionally currying favor by showing obeisance in front of Su Luo. The corner of Nangong Luoyan's mouth moved slightly. He was somewhat speechless. He stroked Su Luo's head and let out a sigh. Look at you, girl. In order to get close to this king, you even built a good relationship with my dragon-scaled horse beforehand. Still saying you are not interested in this king? Girl, your mouth says no but your heart says yes. Don't feel like talking to you. Su Luo lifted her head snubbing him, and patted the dragon-scale horse's head. Immediately, the dragon-scaled horse's speed soared once again. The buildings on both sides constantly fell behind. As fast as lightning, they arrived at their destination. East-facing pier. A luxurious yacht that was about 200 meters long and 30 meters wide stood still, moored at the mouth of the shore. The luxurious yacht was imposing, and simply looked like a luxurious palace on top of the water. What made Su Luo surprised was that in this world, the maritime navy vessels were actually developed to this degree. Nangong Luoyan skillfully pulled Su Luo along by the hand, taking her on a stroll towards that luxurious yacht. On the docking platform, a gangplank was slowly lowered from the yacht. Nangong Luoyan led Su Luo, sauntering up that gangplank. Once they had climbed onto the yacht deck, she found 3 to 4 people sitting on the erected chairs chatting away, both male and female. The men's clothing were embroidered and looked magnificent. The women's figures were beautiful. They all appeared bright, neat, and beautiful, extremely attractive to the eye. Hearing a noise, they uniformly turned their head and looked towards them. Among them was a kindly intellectual youth who was the first to react. He put down the stuff in his hand, stood up and walked over. With a smile in his eyes he said, Nangong, we waited for you for a full 6 hours. If you still had not come, don't even think about hooking a single amethyst thorn fish. Oh, who is this? This youth, without regard for others, exchanged greetings with Nangong Luoyan. He turned his head once again. With a smile on his face, he looked at Su Luo. His eyes were full of inquisitiveness. Nangong Luoyan would also bring a young lady out? Moreover, this miss was also not the Jade Lake's fairy? Nangong Luoyan drew Su Luo by her slender waist even closer to him. In a mild tone of exchanging greetings he said, The future Princess Jean, properly give her your greetings. Oh, Princess Jean? Nangong, you're really quite something. Wordlessly and silently, you found a Princess Jean for yourself. How many beautiful women will inwardly sob tearfully? This white-robed youth's countenance was all smiles. He looked like a refined intellectual with an extremely mild and gentle temper. At this moment, another blue-robed youth came over. His face had a smile and exchanged greetings with Nangong Luyan. Oh, seldom is Nangong Luyan seen bringing a beauty out. Did the sun rise in the west today? Nangong Luyan swept him a faint glance, and the blue-robed youth's shoulder immediately shrank back. Call her sister-in-law. Nangong Luyan's gaze swept a glance at those Oriole and swallow-like ladies not far away. His voice was indifferent. Nangong Luyan also did not deny it, and gave an alluring smile that was devilishly charming. In any case, this lifetime, you will certainly be this king's Princess Jean. Once you are exhausted, you will land in this yellow spring. 1. See where you can escape to. 1. Exhausted, you will land in this yellow spring. This could also be referring to and translated as once you are poor, you will want to land in this golden spring of wealth. Chapter 338, Playboy 9. The blue-robed youth didn't expect that Nangong Luyan would be this serious. His face froze for a moment in a dumbfounded expression, then he smiled. In a well-behaved manner, he called Su Luo sister-in-law, and became more affectionate towards her. I'm not your sister-in-law, and also, don't have any relation to him. Don't just randomly shout out a title at someone. Su Luo thought about it, and pushed Nangong Luyan away by a step, then followed closely by trying to explain it once thoroughly. The blue-robed youth, seeing this, suddenly laughed. He lifted an eyebrow towards Nangong Luyan and laughingly said, Oh, second older brother, has this not been settled? The white-robed youth also followed immediately with a kindly smile. It seems so. No wonder Nangong Luyan was so busy recently, to the point even his shadow couldn't be seen, let alone the person. Wow! Clearly, nobody expected that the always outwardly cold Nangong Luyan would actually declare such a naked confession, and so publicly. Immediately, the people at the scene started to get riled up. Pair after pair of probing and measuring eyes gathered on Su Luo's body. They always thought that Nangong Luyan, in this lifetime, would just be like this, avoiding debauchery, remaining chaste with his advanced stage of misophobia, not fond of having women be near him. However, they never anticipated that Nangong Luyan, who didn't sing, would become an instant sensation when he sang. 1. Su Luo heard the joking manner between them. In her heart, she had some doubts. Nangong Luyan was what kind of identity? When he was at Su Manor, Su Xian worshipped him like a god. With merely a coughing sound, her cheap old man was like someone being scared by a tiger's roar. However, the few people in front of her eyes, each and every one of them was very handsome, talented, glowing with health and vigor. If you placed them outside, each and every one of them would be giants among men. Moreover, just looking at their manner, they appeared to be very familiar with Nangong Luyan. They also called each other brothers. Don't know what the identity of these people was, but she was certain their background and influence were definitely not small. At this moment, don't know from where, Bai Qining popped out, dressed in an all-red embroidered robe. He saw Nangong Luyan and Su Luo, and barged his way into the crowd around them. His entire face and eyes were full of pure smiles. Sister-in-law, I just knew that you would come. You coming is simply too right. Faced with such an enthusiastic and warm Bai Qining, as if they very familiar, Su Luo was puzzled. What did he mean by saying that having her come was simply too right? What hoo-hoo? Bring it here. Bai Qining lifted an eyebrow, with a self-satisfied smile. He held out his hand. Just like you to bother about this little thing, take it. The blue-robed youth on the side humphed twice, and tossed a green crystal stone to Bai Qining. So as it turned out, Bai Qining and the blue-robed youth had made a bet about whether Nangong Luyan would bring Su Luo out. In the end, naturally, it was Bai Qining who won. Bai Qining tried to win favor using someone else's property, and catching that green-colored crystal stone, he gave it to Su Luo. Sister-in-law, a very small gift on our first meeting. Please kindly accept it. The people here, except for Nangong Luyan, Su Luo had only ever seen the red-robed Bai Qining before. Still recalling the last time when he arrived at Su Manor, he was strutting around with such a blustering appearance. He scared those people in Su Manor until they wouldn't dare to even breathe out. She remembered that Beichening came from the unfathomable, enigmatic Beichen family. Not going to accept a reward that's undeserved. Since it was won by you, then you should take it. Su Luo smiled while waving her hand. Perhaps as far as others were concerned, a green-colored crystal stone was very precious. Yet, because she had the little divine dragon, and had also accepted old Chun, who back in the old days had the title of King of Crystal Stones, as a subordinate therefore, regarding crystal stones, Su Luo had never lacked for them. However, the others watching did not know this. Seeing Su Luo refuse the green-colored crystal stone without even batting an eye, the expression in their eyes showed that their evaluation of her had become higher. Beichening smiling happily while stuffing the green-colored crystal stone into Su Luo's hand. Sister-in-law, just take it. This crystal was won by me through a bet. Just accept it as an apology for the matter from last time. Saying this, Beichening snuck a glance at Nangong Luyan. That appearance was like a mouse having seen a cat. Su Luo naturally knew what matter he was referring to. One who didn't sing would become an instant sensation when he sang. Is an idiom saying this person never did anything like this before, and when he suddenly did it, he did in such a way that it shocked people. Chapter 339 Playboy 10. Before, because of his ambiguous words, that seemed right but were wrong, it caused everyone in Su Manor to misunderstand. It was to the extent that everyone thought His Highness Prince Jean had feelings for Su Qing. This thus led to a series of misunderstandings, until finally, Su Qing flew into a rage from the humiliation, and challenged her to a life-and-death duel. Su Luo smiled faintly. It was she herself, who was too narrow-minded. It had nothing to do with you. You must not take the blame, and place it on your own body. Beichening stealthily peeked a glance at Nangong Luyan. Seeing his stiff expression, he immediately curled up, shivering. All of a sudden, he took out everything he carried on his body and gifted it to Su Luo. No need, sister-in-law. You needn't be so polite. If you continue to be this polite, then it would be someone's turn to be impolite to me. After stuffing it all into Su Luo's hand, he immediately turned around and slipped away. He ran away faster than a rabbit. That blue brocade-robed youth had a slight examining look as he glanced at Su Luo. His eyes carried a smile and said to Nangong Luyan, "Last time, Beichen Ying's father dragged him by the ears home to make him do penal servitude. Could it be that that was your masterpiece?" Nangong Luyan swept him a cold glance and declined to comment. He is too noisy. The brocade-robed youth was speechless and spread out his hands. Sure enough, this man was extremely petty and narrow-minded. He wouldn't even eat a little loss, finished thinking. His gaze again went towards Su Luo, though it had a little less of an examining expression. Now it had a somewhat more amiable expression. In the time it took to speak, the luxurious yacht left the shoreline, setting out and advancing towards the vast ocean. Nangong Luyan and that blue-robed youth walked to the side. The two of them seemed to have something to talk about. Su Luo very tactfully walked over to the side with a row of seats that was not far away, and randomly picked an empty chair to sit in. Her gaze roamed to a faraway distance, surveying the scenery in the distance. Now it was already close to nightfall. Numerous red clouds stretched out as far as the eye could see, like an unrolled scarlet silk fabric. The scene was as dazzling as fireworks. Su Luo was just sitting very quickly. A person seized the opportunity and sat down by her side. Su Luo turned her head back to look, and saw that the person who came was Beichening, someone she was familiar with. Su Luo had a very good impression of this lively, unaffected red-robed youth, that at the pivotal moment had supported her. Why aren't you going over to play together with everyone? This dreaded president of the mercenary union that had frightened everyone was now smiling until two of his little canine teeth showed, looking like the sunny boy next door. However, Su Luo knew that if this person was to be vengeful, he was also a master killer who cut down people decisively. Su Luo smiled faintly. Not familiar and also not accustomed to it. Beichening held his arms while looking at Su Luo. Having heard what she said, he suddenly smiled and leaned close to her side. Sister-in-law need not be accustomed to it. Letting them get used to you will be just fine. These words were said full of self-confidence, like making a solemn vow. Clearly, it was because of honoring Nangong Luoyuan. Calling Su Luo with some inquisitiveness, he continued to ask. Able to become Nangong Luoyuan's sworn brother. They are also not some simple characters, right? Oh, on your way here, did Nangong Luoyuan not mention it? A touch of astonishment flashed through Bai Qinying's eyes. It seemed to him, since Nangong Luoyuan cared so much about Su family's fourth girl, then surely they will tell each other everything, right? Su Luo recalled that on the way here, Nangong Luoyuan had sat behind her, constantly trying to provoke and tease her. A touch of scarlet flashed across her face. She made a sound of clearing her throat and sternly said, "Maybe it was because he forgot? Having you tell me is also the same." Bai Qinying also felt that it was necessary to fill in the information for Su Luo once thoroughly. Has sister-in-law heard of one city, 2 palace halls, 3 palaces for sacred places? One city, 2 palace halls, 3 palaces for sacred places? Su Luo's eyes flashed and somewhat astonishingly glanced at Bai Qinying. Soon after, a trace of understanding flashed across Su Luo's beautiful eyes. No wonder these youths could become sworn brothers with Nangong Luoyuan. So as it turned out, every one of their background was not very small. One city, 2 palace halls, 3 palaces, for sacred places. It was this continent's most formidable 10 huge powers. Among them, Purgatory City was the #1 power. Chapter 340, Playboy 11. The 2 palace halls were separated into the Baichen Palace Hall and the Luoyu Palace Hall. Bai Qinying came from the unfathomable, enigmatic Baichen Palace. The 3 palaces were separated into the Jade Lake Palace, the Green Jade Palace and Central Palace. The Jade Lake's fairy was the Jade Lake Palace's, this generation's, most favored princess. The 4 royal families were the Nangong family, Anya family, Ouyang family and Xianyuan family. Not to speak of the existence of that one city, 2 palace halls, 3 palaces, and only mentioning just that 4 great families. On this blue sky continent, the 4 great families each controlled 4 great countries. Like the Nangong family, who was in control of the nation of Eastern Ling, they encouraged good governance, and were thus unfailing. Bai Qinying pointed to that blue-robed youth and introduced him, saying, "Don't just look at his happy and enthusiastic appearance when dealing with anyone. This joker comes from the Green Jade Palace. As a child, he was extraordinarily talented, gifted and smart. His strength is so great, to the point of astonishing people. Since he was small, he ate medicinal pills as if eating a meal. Now, he is already at the peak of 6th rank. Lan Xian, this guy's strength, is not that much different from Nangong Luoyuan's. Peak of 6th rank? Su Luo somewhat astonishingly looked at that blue-robed youth. Never expected that his strength was at the peak of 6th rank. Really someone she must not be contemptuous of. In addition, that person who is fond of wearing white is Anya Ming, the South Nation's 3rd royal prince. Bai Qinying pointed to the last person, the white-robed youth who had previously stood up and spoken to them, and advised by earnestly saying, "Don't just look at his warm, gentle, sleek appearance, and feel that he is easy to get along with. That branch is the same as Nangong Luoyuan. He absolutely is a master at being two-faced. Therefore, if you have nothing to do, talk less with him. It is so as to avoid being scammed by him, and still help him count the money." Su Luo looked at Bai Qinying's grumbling with a deeply ingrained, long-standing, resentful expression on his face. She secretly laughed in her heart. It seemed like Bai Qinying had been scammed by this Anya Ming, and still had helped him count the money before. Moreover, the number of times he got scammed was absolutely unlikely to be small. How does sister-in-law feel about me? My looks are also considered at the top of the jade tree. Outstanding, elegant, with universal appeal. A flower which sees me will bloom, right? 3 black lines appeared on Su Luo's forehead. It really was that people who crowd together were just like birds of a feather flocking together. Nangong Luoyuan's sworn brothers were just like him, without any sense of shame and thick-skinned. Bai Qinying was entirely unaware of Su Luo's inner ridicule of him. He excitedly continued to boast nonstop. Temperament is like this: if you want sunshine, then there is sunshine. If you want gentleness, Then there is gentleness, stormy or light breeze. What you want to do, we'll do it. Sister-in-law, you agree this is correct, right? This. He really didn't understand. What made Su Luo most puzzled was why this child was boasting like this in front of her. Managed to seem as if he was selling himself. However, Bei Qining very quickly helped her clear up the confusion. Since sister-in-law also thinks I am a good person, then you should speak a few sentences of good words on my behalf in front of Nangong Luoyan, okay? Please, the high and mighty venerable president of the mercenary union, don't use this kind of limpid, bright eyes that looked so pitifully to Bisher, okay? Su Luo held her forehead and dumbfoundedly said, Don't call me sister-in-law. I really don't have any relationship with Nangong Luoyan. Furthermore, you are his sworn brother. Your words are even more useful than mine. Sister-in-law, don't crack jokes. In front of Nangong, one sentence from you is equal to 100 sentences from me. Sister-in-law, I beseech you, say something to Nangong so that I won't once again be dragged home to practice sound wave martial arts. Bei Qining had a face of having long suffered, that was desperate from depression, as if that sound wave martial arts tormented him very miserably. Su Luo was helpless from lack of a better option. I already told you, don't call me sister-in-law. Bei Qining calling her like this made it seem as if her status has successfully changed to Princess Jean, Nangong Luoyan's wife. Then sister-in-law, can you please just help me? Bei Qining had a wailing at a funeral expression on his little face. His rosy, glossy lips opened and closed, and his watery, limpid eyes, which were like peach blossoms, looked at Su Luo, waiting anxiously. Chapter 341 Playboy 12. Perhaps you are mistaken about something? My relationship with Nangong Luoyan is absolutely not what you guys are imagining. Don't confuse one thing with another. Su Luo simply could not explain it clearly enough for him to understand. She had a feeling she was only making it worse. Bei Qining had a considering expression as he stared at Su Luo. He still hasn't caught you from the chase yet? Hey sister-in-law, Nangong Luoyan is a good person. Why is it that you won't accept him? Su Luo suddenly was at a loss for words. This child's words were really blunt that it was cute, making it hard for her to resist. Bei Qining warmly looked at Su Luo. Really, Nangong Luoyan is a good person. A guy like him completely does not lack for women. But for so many years, he had always avoided debauchery and remained chaste. He never let any other women even get near him. Sister-in-law, this is simply too rare and hard to come by. You tell me, am I right or not? To remain chaste, these kind of words being used on Nangong Luoyan's body, Su Luo felt it was somewhat embarrassing and frustrating. Only, saying that Nangong Luoyan remained chaste, these words seemed somewhat inappropriate. Su Luo said it very bluntly. Don't tell me, a woman never appeared by his side. Then, what was the Jade Lake's fairy considered as? Bei Qining seriously looked at her, sincerely and earnestly teaching her. A guy like him, if a woman was given an opportunity, then she wouldn't be able to escape. Up to now, he only gave one person this opportunity, and that's all. You think about it, isn't it like this? Bei Qingying's words made the soft area closest to her heart tremble slightly. Bei Qingying's tone when speaking was unusually serious and gentle. For a split second, it made her feel as if he was really telling the truth. However, in Su Luo's mind, unavoidably, that exceedingly refined and beyond beautiful face that was above the common populace appeared. All of a sudden she smiled, though her smile seemed forced. Since you guys are childhood friends who grew up together, you couldn't possibly not know the Jade Lake's fairy, right? This person chased after her to kill her several times. She would absolutely not let her get away with it. At that time, she and the Jade Lake's fairy would not be able to exist together. When the time comes, whose side would Nangong Luoyan, who spoiled and indulged the Jade Lake's fairy, stand on? It was truly hard to say. A vexed expression flashed through Bei Qinying's eyes. He silently breathed out a sigh. His expression was heavy and yet earnest. He. If Nangong Luoyan had given her an opportunity, then how could the position of Princess Jean be empty? To tell you the truth, the Jade Lake Palace, all along, had intended them to be connected through marriage. Eastern Ling's emperor also had the same notion. The only person who would not agree to it is Nangong Luoyuan. Su Luo looked at him with astonishment and some disbelief. After all, the scene in the Sunset Mountain Range at that time had provided her with an impression that was too deep. That pair was like the jade annulus, like a painting. They were inseparably in love. She smiled at him. He whispered softly to her. This picturesque scene had all along been a deep thorn in her heart. Ordinarily, it was silent. At the most critical time, it would run out to punch her in the solar plexus. Bai Qining patted her shoulder, giving her ample encouragement. Before, why Nangong would refuse her, I don't know. Yet since meeting you, his entire person has changed. His aura has become less gloomy, has become more spirited and full of life. Wasn't he always a master without the slightest scruple and despising worldly conventions? From what I see, he is living quite well. An image of Nangong Luoyuan's manner, an appearance of always teasing and making fun of her emerged in her head. Whenever they met, at which time did he not resemble a rakish hooligan teasing her? It was completely unlike what Bai Qining said about him being that great and amazing. Bai Qining slowly shook his head, as his gaze looked to a distant place. Quietly and unmovingly, he looked at the clear, gleaming sunlight that was reflected from the waves in the distance. A long time later he faintly said, "You don't understand, he hasn't been happy since he was little. Before he was 8 years old, he almost completely sealed himself up. Not listening, not looking, not asking and not speaking, as if completely shutting himself away. Afterwards he slowly got a little better." Chapter 342 Fright on Board 1. That kind of alluring and devilishly charming Nangong Luoyuan, in his childhood, had actually shut himself up? Su Luo's shock was written all over her face. Yes, it had something to do with the death of his mother, who was an imperial concubine. But this matter must wait until he wants to tell you himself. I cannot tell you. Bai Qining, after saying this, he stood up. Finally he gazed deeply at Su Luo. His tone had a thread of meaning to entrust a task to her. Su Luo, that Nangong could open wide his inner heart to someone. It is not easy for him. You should stop hurting him again, okay? Su Luo watched Bai Qining's back as he left, and bowed her head to ponder everything deeply. She couldn't tell at all that Nangong Luoyuan's heart had a shadow purely by his appearance. Was it because she simply did not pay attention to his mood, or that he hid it too well? In addition, there was that wound on his body. It should also be related to his childhood, right? He would rather die of an illness than seek medical help. Did it also have something to do with this matter? Su Luo's brain was full of questions, however. Bai Qining unfortunately explicitly informed her that he could not say it. If she wanted to know, she had no choice but to go look for Nangong Luoyuan. Bang! A sharp and clear burst of sound exploded above Su Luo's forehead. Su Luo angrily lifted up her eyes and encountered Nangong Luoyuan's handsome face that carried a smile. What are you thinking about that made you this enthralled? Be careful you don't get pushed into the water, and don't even know it. Nangong Luoyuan's tone was low, deep and enticing. His smile was neat, like the clouds softly drifting over the surface of a lake, giving people a very comfortable feeling. Su Luo blankly and foolishly looked at him. The him right now appeared to be very relaxed and easygoing. Yet he still gave off a kind of outstanding, extraordinary sense of being a giant among men. Originally, she had always thought that Nangong Luoyuan was a person who despised worldly conventions, doing as he pleased without the slightest scruple. But ever since she heard Bai Qinying's words from a moment ago, afterwards, when Su Luo looked at Nangong Luoyuan again, her gaze couldn't help but carry an expression of probing and sizing him up. His handsome face had a smiling expression. That gaze was beautiful and secluded like a deep pond. Yet it was also clear like a deep, pure spring. Normally, he would always be cold and didn't smile often. His smile could be separated very clearly. It was almost entirely different. Under a violent rage, it was a coldly fierce, demonic smile. And when he was teasing her, it was a devilishly charming, shallow smile. Apart from these kinds, she hadn't seen him smile once. The him right now had both hands held behind his back, the corner of his robe flipping over, like the only stand-alone, elegant son of nobility. His eyes carried a smile which was filled with clear water as they watched her. The smile at the corner of his lips got even bigger. Unexpectedly, it even had a hint of warmth like springtime. His facial features were exquisite beyond compare, simply world-shaking. This smile gave Su Luo a sense of a kind of illusionary beauty that could cause the downfall of a city. As if once she falls in, she would be so intoxicated that she would be unwilling to wake up again. This kind of him was really like what Bei Qining had said, that he had a piece of tragic past that he did not want to recollect, that he had a childhood where he shut himself in. Su Luo gazed at him in a daze. Momentarily, she didn't know what she should say, and what kind of manner she should use to face him. Is this king that good-looking? Actually made you dazed from looking? The corner of his mouth hooked into a devilishly charming shallow smile. Sure enough, it was this kind of despising worldly conventions Nangong Luoyan that she was most familiar with. Su Luo slowly exhaled a deep mouthful of air. Originally, she wanted to glare at him, but recalling Bei Qinying's words, she felt as if she really didn't treat him well, and changed her tone of voice. Are you a peacock? All day long. You are this narcissistic, and also unashamed of it. This is not narcissism, rather it is self-confidence, understand? Nangong Luoyan tapped her head. It is just narcissism. There is no one else more narcissistic when compared to you. Su Luo let out 2 snorting sounds. Nangong Luoyan also did not get angry. It seemed as if his mood was very good. He pulled on her hand, and took her along to walk towards the crowd of people. Seeing the endless ocean outside, Nangong Luoyan lazily asked a sentence. Do you know how to swim? Su Luo nodded her head. Barely know a little. Chapter 343. Fright on board too. Didn't know from where Bei Qining popped out again, and he winked at Su Luo. You shouldn't be afraid, Nangong Luoyan is very amazing. Even if the Dragon King won, from the myths invited you to the Crystal Palace as a guest, Nangong Luoyan will also fish you right back up. Su Luo inquisitively looked at Nangong Luoyan. A person's energy would eventually reach a limit. Why was it that he knew everything? How was he proficient at everything? Nangong Luoyan smugly lifted an eyebrow, and gave 2 light coughing sounds. He repressed the self-satisfaction at the corner of his lips. Don't waste your words with him. Let's go. I'll bring you over to play a little. Seeing his smug expression, suddenly, what Bei Qining said appeared in Su Luo's mind. Bei Qining said, since meeting you, his entire person has changed, become someone more alive. Was this kind of Nangong Luoyan what you would call being more alive? Then, when he was a child, the sight of a little boy carved from jade-like gems, with a taut little face, sealing himself off in a world of darkness, appeared in Su Luo's mind. Su Luo's heart suddenly started to ache, and her expression froze. What's wrong? Nangong Luoyan detected that her expression had become strange, and he asked a little nervously. Just this could make the noble and indifferent him so nervous? Su Luo did not answer, and instead changed the topic. Her brows and eyes bent in a clear and light smiling expression as she gazed at him. What games are you bringing me to play? Just at this moment Anya Ming, who sat in front of a small table playing chess at the side, put down a chess piece. Checkmate. Sitting opposite of him was Lan Xian, who vexedly grabbed his hair. Ultimately, he still had no strategy to try and carelessly messed up the chess pieces on the board. Ah, don't want to continue, not going to play this, it's making me bored to death. Anya Ming glowered at Lan Xian. You lost and just destroyed the chess game, don't have good chess manners. Humph humph. Lan Xian leaned back into his chair, and lazily shot a glance at Anya Ming. Beating me and you get so proud? When it comes to playing chess, Nangong Luoyan could throw you to a few streets away. If you have the ability, go beat him at chess. Nangong Luoyan knew how to play chess, and also had superb chess skills. Su Luo's inquisitive gaze landed on Nangong Luoyan's body. Nangong Luoyan languidly reclined on a deck chair. His sword-like eyebrow lifted slightly, but he did not speak. Bei Qining saw that Su Luo was curious and attending to her explained. Nangong's chess skill is the most exquisite. When he was 8 years old at that time, he played chess against the scholars at the Imperial Hanlin Academy University, until every one of them lost and fled. Since then his skills have no rival, but also because of this he washed his hands off from playing chess. From that time on he never played chess again. Nangong Liuyan's phoenix eyes were closed. Faint sunlight shone on his body. His slender eyebrows and pure white skin had a slight luster that seemed to be flowing. The sumptuousness of his whole body, even though his eyes were closed, still made a person unable to move their gaze away. Right now, he seemed to have sunk into a deep sleep and hadn't heard what Beichening said. His face didn't have any change in expression. However, having heard what was said, Su Luo was inevitably speechless. Wasn't the 8-year-old Nangong Liuyan still a closed-off child? Unexpectedly, he could still play chess to the point of making the scholars at Imperial Hanlin Academy University lose and flee? How large and intelligent was this guy's brain? No wonder his favorite pastime was to ridicule people through sarcasm. He calculated his schemes and machinations completely with numerous layers and endless amounts. As it turned out, those stratagems, as far as he was concerned, were like eating a meal or drinking water. It was that simple. Oh, that's right, where is this yacht heading to? Now Su Luo finally had a good opportunity to ask. Before, Nangong Liuyan did not tell her any of the details. She also didn't carefully ask before being pulled here by him. Now, only after the yacht had sailed for a long time, did she finally have time to question them properly. Beichening was simply somewhat speechless. Sister-in-law, do you not even know about the once-a-year fishing event for amethyst thorn fish? Having only arrived in this world for a few months, Su Luo slowly shook her head. You tell it to me in detail before. I was always locked in at Su Manor, so not very familiar with the matters on this continent. 1. The Dragon King. This refers to the Dragon King from the Chinese mythological story written called Journey to the West. They are dragons that with a sneeze could cause rain, and they live in the Crystal Palace within the ocean as rulers. There are 4 Dragon Kings that ruled the 4 seas, which were named based on the 4 directions. Chapter 344, Fright on Board 3. Beichening expressed that he clearly understood her words, and very kind-heartedly thoroughly explained it once for her. The body of an amethyst thorn fish contains rich spirit power. The spirit power from one amethyst thorn fish has the same amount of spirit power as one piece of green-colored crystal stone. As a result, everyone on the continent wants to catch an amethyst thorn fish. Beichening paused for a moment, then continued to explain. However, the amethyst thorn fish is very clever and rarely can be seen normally. Only on the night of July 15th would they gather around the periphery of the amethyst thorn island on the East Sea. Thus, if you want to capture an amethyst thorn fish, this opportunity only comes once a year. No wonder initially, when she and Nangong Liuyan had arrived, Anya Ming had said that sentence in complaint. So as it turned out, today's mission was to capture some amethyst thorn fishes. Why would it only happen on the day of July 15th? Su Luo clearly did not understand. Was July 15th a very special day? Nobody knows the answer to this mystery. If people know, then very likely no one needs to wait for this day every year. Beichening told it as it is. Will there be a lot of people going? Su Luo curiously asked. One amethyst thorn fish was equivalent to the spirit power in a green-colored crystal stone. A green-colored crystal stone on the continent was quite rare. The market price was 5,000 gold coins. Then this once-a-year gathering to catch fish ought to be very lively and bustling with excitement, right? No, the number of people would unlikely be many, Beichening explained. It's because not just everyone can travel across the areas of water filled with waterspouts to reach the amethyst-thorned island. There are only a few luxurious yachts in the entire Eastern Ling Empire that can cross the waterspouts. Waterspouts? Su Luo was just about to ask, but saw Nangong Liuyan suddenly open his phoenix eyes. A cold ray of light flashed through his eyes. Suddenly, he reached out his hand, and with one swoop, he immediately scooped Su Luo into his embrace. Su Luo hadn't finished speaking when she felt a severe jolt come from the hull of the ship. Su Luo was unable to stand stably. All of a sudden, she bumped into Nangong Liuyan's extremely strong chest. Her nose was extremely sore from knocking into him. That blood almost flowed from her nose. Su Luo was still considered to be one of the lucky ones. On the side, those Oriole and Swallow-like women who were brought on board by Bei Chening. They were originally sitting on the chairs chatting. Now, they were sent flying into mid-air by the violent hit on the boat. When the yacht dropped with the force, they were all mercilessly thrown onto the deck. This fall nearly shattered all the bones in their bodies into pieces. They moaned unceasingly for a very long time. They weren't able to crawl up. However, it was still unfinished. The yacht dropped down and very quickly was lifted high up to float above, almost flying into midair. And once again, it heavily dropped onto the water's surface, and it continuously looped in this cycle of motion. The deck was shaking so violently such that simply nobody could stand on it. Those few Oriole and Swallow-like women, whose bodies still hadn't crawled up, were once again ruthlessly thrown up high and again fell to the deck. They just resembled some playthings that nature was toying with in the palm of its hand. Between these powerful shakes, the yacht again becomes stable. A heavy and imposing expression flashed through both An Yiming and Lan Xian's face at this time. Both of them, with very quick steps, walked towards the front of the deck. Bei Chening also followed after them. He walked a few steps and again turned sideways to look at Nangong Luyan. Is second older brother not coming? Nangong Luyan calmly and composedly played with Su Luo's hair, and leisurely said, "The two of them are more than sufficient." Bei Chening forced a smile and rubbed his nose. He made a wry face towards Su Luo, and happily took off towards the two people with a bounce. It seemed to Su Luo, this president of the mercenary union, was practically the big boy next door that never grew up. Seeing that Bei Chening had left, Su Luo turned her head around to ask curiously, "Is this here the areas of water with waterspouts?" Nangong Luyan was calm and unruffled in the midst of chaos, as he tidied up her slightly disarrayed hair for her. There was a touch of a tenderness on his face, as he shallowly smiled and said, "This is merely the beginning and nothing more. Are you afraid?" Chapter 345, Fright on Board 4. Su Luo's beautiful pupils roamed, while she lifted an eyebrow and smiled. "What's to be afraid of? My swimming technique is pretty good. Want to have a race with me?" Nangong Luyan's intoxicating, fluid glance could move heartstrings. He spoilingly and indulgently rubbed her head. "Little crow's beak, 1. I hope what you said will not hit the mark." Could the implication be that this huge luxurious yacht could still sink? Su Luo stuck out her tongue and poked her head out of Nangong Luyan's embrace to explore. She looked towards where Bei Chening and them were, and somewhat curiously asked, "What are they doing?" "Suppressing the waterspouts." Nangong Luyan led Su Luo along by the hand. His mood was extremely relaxed. "Do you want to go and have a look? These few guys normally live like princes. It's rare for them to use their strength. We ought to have a good look. There are not many opportunities of this kind." The always terse, laconic and silence is golden, Nangong Luyan would only say long sentences in front of Su Luo. Also, only she was worth him spending a lot of patience to come over to entice and coax her. Since this was a rare opportunity, naturally, she would not miss it. Su Luo hurriedly nodded her head. She cast Nangong Luyan's hand aside, and ran towards the place where Bei Chening and them were located. That place was at the bow of the ship. It could let her clearly see the situation on the sea surface up ahead. Nangong Luyan pampering and spoilingly followed behind her. At any time, he was prepared to protect her well. Yet, he completely disregarded the pile of women lying on the ground, with almost all the bones in their bodies shattered into pieces. Su Luo could clearly see that ahead, for as far as the eye could see, there were huge whirlpools that appeared on the sea surface. They looked like the wide-open bloody maw of a beast of prey showing off their strength by casting sidelong glances at them. In the distance, Su Luo saw a ship that was dodging left and right. But finally, it was still swept up by the waterspout. It disappeared completely in a flash, not leaving behind even a bit of a trace. That ship was about 50 meters long. Although it wasn't comparable to their current yacht, it also wasn't considered that much smaller. However, with just the effort of the blink of an eye, it was engulfed completely. This made Su Luo unable to help but to start to be more serious and prudent. Afraid? Nangong Luyan calmly stood by her side. He reached out his hand to encircle her waist and fastened her to his chest. Threads of silken hair which were black as ink, and were like ribbons, poured down in torrents. A light breeze brushed past, bringing a burst of a good scent, that was the sweet scent of jasper flowers. He looked at her deeply and enticingly, unblinkingly watching her. It appeared as if he was looking at the most precious treasure. Su Luo looked at him, then turned her head again to look at the waterspouts that reached the sky. The rolled-up waves on the sea surface were like hundreds of flowers, forcing the huge yacht to lean east, then almost fall to the west. The huge waves that hit the hull caused an earth-shattering water screen, sending out bursts of booms and rumbling sounds. They were surrounded by perils which almost couldn't be avoided or fled from. Those black waterspouts seemed to be terrifyingly sinister and murderous-looking. In front of nature's anger, at the time where the large waves covered the sky, mankind just seemed so insignificant. Su Luo looked ahead and indifferently said, "Not that frightening." Because with him here, he wouldn't let her have an accident. Just at this moment, the originally steady hull of the yacht, all of a sudden shuddered violently. Huge waves, one after another, again rushed over to attack. Those huge waves that covered the sky swirled the yacht up high, and once again threw it down heavily. With Nangong Luyan acting as her shield, Su Luo nestled into his side. Her body actually didn't even move a little bit. While those few women brought by Bei Chening, and them had long ago taken the rope the sailors tossed to them. One end of the rope was tied to the hull of the yacht, while the other was tied around their waist. Thus, even though it would be extremely painful to be thrown up high and fell down, but at least, they wouldn't be thrown off the ship. They could still save their life. In this perilous situation, Su Luo's gaze landed upon An Yiming and Lan Xian's body. One crow's beak. A person who made an inauspicious remark. Chapter 346, Fright on Board 5. Only at this moment did she find out that An Yiming had the water attribute and Lan Xian had the wind attribute. An Yiming's eyes narrowed slightly as he condensed all the spirit strength in his body. The resulting radiance seemed to contain an inexhaustible force, directly containing the waterspouts ahead of them. This caused the sea surface to become tranquil, and Lan Xian followed with controlling the wind speed in their surroundings. He concentrated all the wind speed to the rear of the yacht, making the yacht advance forward with great speed. Since this was area of water filled with waterspouts, then there wouldn't be merely one waterspout. Rather, it was continuous and with no end. It was rows on top of rows, practically unable to see the end. With regards to An Yiming's strength, he was unable to control all of the waterspouts, but he could control the ones within the range of 100 meters in front of them on the sea surface. Therefore, the scene right now was established by An Yiming concentrating his spirit powers to open up a straight line of tranquil areas of water that was 100 meters long and 50 meters wide. Lan Xian, meanwhile, hastened the wind speed to blow the yacht to move at its best and fastest speed. In this situation where the huge waves overflowed to the sky, wanting to create a region of tranquil areas of water, what degree of difficulty must it be? In less than a quarter of an hour, An Yiming's face was coated in a thin layer of perspiration, and his complexion had also become paler. Lan Xian's complexion was not that much better than An Yiming's. His expression had a touch of being in a difficult situation, but the energy they sacrificed was worth it, because even if the surroundings were full of huge waves that covered the sky from endless waterspouts, yet their yacht continued to advance forward at a smooth and rapid speed. It wasn't being thrown around left and right like before, causing injury and deaths among the crew. Under this kind of situation and silence, a sound of alarm was suddenly shouted out from among the crowd of people. Su Luo looked towards the source of the sound. Momentarily, her expression became a little complicated. To the left side, not far away, a ship sailed continuously towards their direction. Su Luo guessed the other side might have seen their yacht float across the sea surface in a straight line on a calm sea, and thought that this was a route to flee for their lives. As a result, even if they were slapped around by the huge waves, they would still try to draw close to their side. The other side, with great difficulty, arrived behind the yacht. However, before they could give voice to their joy, in an instant, they were swept up by a huge waterspout into the darkness of the underworld. It was a pity that the other side did not know. This area of tranquil water was not naturally created by the heavens. Rather, it was brought about by an expert water element mage. Furthermore, the sustainable time was over in a blink of an eye. After their yacht sailed past, that tranquil area naturally was again restored into a treacherous waterspouts. It was unfortunate that the other side had strived for a long time to finally arrive right behind the yacht, but was still buried at sea. Su Luo frowned slightly. Even though everyone knows that to cross the areas of water filled with waterspouts is very treacherous, why would they still come to throw away their lives? It seemed to her that people who could cross this body of water were like Anya Ming and Lan Xian kind of people. One was a water system expert, another was a wind system expert. Both of them acting in concert were able to get them safely through. Nangong Luyan smiled while shaking his head. Human beings will die for riches just as birds will for food. Su Luo thought about it, and felt that it was just like this. On this continent, how difficult was it to find the green crystal stone? But one amethyst thorn fish was equivalent to the value of one piece of green-colored crystal stone. And it was also an opportunity that came only once a year. If you could cross the waterspouts to catch an amethyst thorn fish, even if it was merely one fish, you would have also made a fortune. Nangong Luyan faintly smiled while lifting an eyebrow and lightly said, "Actually, how could amethyst thorn fish be hooked so easily? It isn't easy to hook? Wasn't it merely a fish that swam in water? If you couldn't hook one, then couldn't you just throw a net to catch it?" With one glance, Nangong Luyan was able to see those Su Luo's thoughts and slowly shook his head. An amethyst-thorned fish, how intelligent is it? How sharp is its teeth? How could a fishnet trap it? Only if it wants to take the bait, otherwise nobody could capture it. Chapter 347, Fright on Board 6. Unexpectedly, there were additional things she needed to pay attention to. Then, looks like it would be very difficult to catch one. However, you needn't be worried. Nangong Luyan gave off a wicked radiance that was dazzlingly beautiful and devilishly charming. This king's little princess has always had good luck. Other people might not be able to catch any, but Luoer will certainly return from the journey well rewarded. How could it be possible? Su Luo sent him a glare. Don't have such high expectations for me. Otherwise you will be very disappointed. Nangong Luyan used his hands to stand up. He calmly said, "Time after time, when has Luo girl let this king be disappointed? Therefore this king has very very high expectations for you. Don't feel like paying you any attention." Su Luo snorted. Actually, truth be told, in her former life and this one, she didn't even know how to fish, let alone going to hook such a full of spirit power amethyst thorn fish. Simply thinking about it gave her a headache. Anya Ming and Lan Xian's thin layer of perspiration condensed into bead size, and the two of them tumbled down. In a short time, they looked extremely exhausted. Su Luo poked Nangong Luyan's arm. "Aren't you going to go up and lend a hand?" Nangong Luyan fiddled with Su Luo's hair, and unhurriedly let out a hum. "This king is busy keeping Luo girl company. Where would I have the time to bother with them?" Su Luo was immediately speechless. At this kind of dangerous time, this guy could be so careless as to tease her. She really should not use common sense to reason with him. Fortunately, Anya Ming and Lan Xian both worked hard and did not fall short. Even though they were frighteningly exhausted, nevertheless, they persevered with their teeth clenched. Probably after about an hour later, the body of water in front of them became dead calm. Under the light of the sun, the clear and crystalline water gleamed from the reflected rays. Who could have anticipated that in the deepest part of the waterspout-filled waters, there would be such tranquil waters? As if heaven and earth had become one. Birds were flying and fishes were jumping. The cool breeze blew gently, and not a wave rippled. Under the sunshine, the sky was clear and the air was pure. The waves were arranged like smooth lengths of silk cloths, coming slowly by sliding, then leaving again evenly. It gave people a kind of serene, peaceful and quiet feeling. Compared to just now, being surrounded by the perilous areas of water full of waterspouts, They was completely two opposite situations. A difference like heaven and earth. Anya Ming and Lan Xian. Both of them were completely lacking in form as they dropped down to sit on the deck, gasping large mouthfuls of air and panting coarsely. Their clothing was soaked through with perspiration from head to toe. They now appeared battered and exhausted, so weary that they couldn't even speak. They only continued to breathe in large mouthfuls of fresh air. Oh yeah, at last we have finally crossed through. Didn't know from where Bei Qining came out from. He very kindly extended each of them a cup of fresh water, but also continued to grumble. Needless for me to say to you guys, last year, it only took a quarter of an hour to cross. Unexpectedly this year, it took an hour. Do you guys not feel any shame? Lan Xian directly sent a kick towards him. You hey, shut up for me, your daddy. Last year, Nangong Luyan put on a one-man show. Of course it was effortless. You have the ability, then next year you do it. It was all very well to talk, but doing it was another matter. Last year, seeing Nangong Luyan, that kind of effortless, at ease and calm manner, made them think it was very simple. Didn't expect that once they took over the position, they would find out how difficult it was to control the waterspouts and the yacht speed. Bei Qining was nimble as a rabbit, easily avoiding the kick, and pouted his brilliantly red lips, saying, "What's so difficult about this? Next year, I and sister-in-law together absolutely will beat you guys' speed." When Bei Qining finished speaking, with a face eagerly attentive and trying to get the desired result, smiled towards Su Luo. His smiling expression was so radiant that only his teeth showed, while his eyes could not be seen. Sister-in-law, you also agree, right? Next year the two of us will partner up and let them see. Su Luo hadn't even replied before Lan Xian rolled his eyes at Bei Qining, saying, "That's enough already. Just your little schemes, who doesn't know? Openly shouting out for sister-in-law to partner together with you, when ultimately, the one exerting himself, isn't it still Nangong?" Bei Qinying's thoughts were laid bare, but he didn't get angry and merely gave two humphs. "Don't you guys underestimate sister-in-law. If I was to tell, you guys will be scared to death." Chapter 348. Fright on Board 7. In a single brush stroke's worth of time, Nangong Luyan suddenly came and cut in with a line. "That can certainly be arranged. It's decided then, next year, it will just be you and Luo girl. This king will not interfere." "Just that girl?" Anya Ming and Lan Xian glanced at Su Luo doubtfully. According to the information they received, this fourth miss from the Su family was proclaimed as a good-for-nothing after the result of her spirit test at the age of 5. Later on, although she had concealed her strength and secretly cultivated, she was still merely at the strength of a third rank. Merely at the level of a third rank. Even with Bei Qining as a partner, how could they be able to traverse across this territory full of waterspouts in a situation without Nangong Luyan's help? Was this a joke? Even the two of them, who were both 6th rank in cultivation, were exhausted to the max, alright? Anya Ming and Lan Xian both somewhat humorously shook their heads. Love truly made people blind. They never thought that someone as wise and far-sighted as Nangong would also have such muddled moments. Su Luo originally wanted to flatly reject it, but once she saw both Anya Ming and Lan Xian's expressions of complete disbelief, if she was to flatly refuse now, would she not be taken lightly by them? While she was hesitating, Bei Qining had already agreed. Compared to Anya Ming and Lan Xian, Bei Qinying's understanding of Su Luo was a little deeper. After his initial shock passed, he immediately nodded his agreement. "Good, it's a deal." With that said, Bei Qining smugly grinned at Su Luo and said, "Sister-in-law, did you hear that? Next year's catch of amethyst thorn fish will be split between the two of us." Hee. Su Luo then realized that actually, whomever put in the effort to cross the territory of waterspouts, the catch of amethyst thorn fish for that year would belong to them. Nangong Luyan's eyes gleamed with demonic light. "You should simply focus on catching your fish. Whatever amethyst thorn fish you catch will all naturally belong to you. They won't be that shameless to snatch from you." "How can you say it like that, making us seem like pirates?" Lan Xian indignantly said. He turned around to heroically say to Su Luo while waving his hand, "Sister-in-law, Just like Nangong said, you go ahead and fish for yourself. The amethyst thorn fish you catch will naturally all belong to you. We won't take a single one. Anya Ming also righteously joined in and continued. Lan Xian's words are my words. We definitely do not want any of sister-in-law's amethyst thorn fishes. Besides, what amethyst thorn fish could a mere little third-rank martial artist catch? Not being caught back by the amethyst thorn fish, instead could already be considered pretty good. Anya Ming and Lan Xian simply did not believe that Su Luo had the ability to catch any amethyst thorn fish. Therefore, the two of them vowed their refusal in unison. The pitiful duo did not know that very soon, because of their decision, they would pay a very bitter price and regret it till their intestines turned green. Didn't know how long they had traveled when a tiny island appeared ahead. This was the legendary Amethyst Thorned Island? Except the island was barren, so flat that one could gallop right across, and there was absolutely nothing on it. Sparsely surrounding the island were some parked yachts. Seeing the luxury yacht flying Prince Jean Royal's banner, those who had already arrived on the Amethyst Thorned Island all looked over. They respectfully assembled, awaiting His Highness Prince Jin's arrival to grace them with his presence. Nangong Luyan disembarked holding Su Luo's hand, leisurely descending by stepping on the wooden gangplank. With black as a base color and gold trims on the hems, his brocade robe was folded in layers like a cloudy fog. It had barely appeared, and it already immediately brought about a complete dignified aura. Su Luo originally wanted to shake off his hand, but his arm was so strong and powerful that regardless of how she shook, she couldn't shake him off. Didn't know why this time. Nangong Luyan seemed to be especially stubborn. No matter how gently she cajoled him, his hand firmly held hers and wouldn't loosen even for a moment. Chapter 349. Fright on Board, 8. Having no other alternative, Su Luo could only bite the bullet and follow by his side, enduring the crowd's stares. Subsequently, Bei Chening, Anya Ming and Lan Xian, every single one of them appeared, self-confident, unafraid and without regard for others. Each and every one of their entrants gave the crowd an intense and awe-inspiring visual impression. Each of them were arrogant sons of heaven, with large clans supporting behind each of them. Their statuses were exceedingly high and precious, such that should they have a mishap, very likely, the entire continent would be thrown in turmoil. The instant he saw Su Luo, the face of a person among the crowd immediately blackened. The Crown Prince's pair of eyes were malicious. His complexion became gloomy enough that water could drip out from it. Earlier, there were already rumors of Nangong Luyan and Su Luo having an affair. Initially, he did not believe it. Because Nangong Luyan was what kind of exalted person? How could he fancy a good-for-nothing like Su Luo? Only he could never have imagined that a girl he did not want to marry and personally broke off the engagement with would in the blink of an eye hook up with Nangong Luyan. This was simply a slap to his face. The Crown Prince coldly glared at Su Luo. Seeing her walk past by his side, he couldn't help but to coldly snort. Loathsome girl, who allowed you to come here? What qualifications do you have to be in this place? Su Luo dismissively cast him a glance. Oh, the Crown Prince? How could she bump into him? Really unlucky. Without waiting for Su Luo to reply, Bei Chening, who was on the side, had already jumped out. With matters that could make it difficult for the Crown Prince, he was always the first in line. One could see Bei Chening with his hands folded behind his back, strutting over. He cast sidelong glances at the Crown Prince with head high and chest out. Oh, here I was wondering who it is. So, it turned out to be Nangong Liujua. What, last year? You couldn't even catch a single fish. Did you come here to disgrace yourself again this year? Bei Chening, this child's words, were just that adorably honest. A single sentence had already made the Crown Prince choke until his face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The Crown Prince viciously glared at him, then coldly snorted a few times. This prince is speaking with Su Luo. What are you mouthing off for? Bei Chening did not mind the Crown Prince's attitude one bit, and started laughing instead. I say, you're such an interesting person. The other person obviously can't be bothered with you. Why are you jolting your butt so eagerly, one, to move closer? You're even the crown prince, how shameless. The crown prince's face grew livid. Did this little brat know how to speak properly? Why did every sentence seem to be dipped in venom? Simply could poison people to death. The crown prince angrily huffed and glared once more at Bei Qining before turning his head to holler at Su Luo. You come over here for this prince. Su Luo somewhat speechlessly rolled her eyes at this crown prince too. Was this person sick? Did she have any relation to him? He really thought himself to be so desirable? Su Luo appeared not to have heard him. She turned her head towards another direction, admiring the scenery in the distance with great interest. Who knew that this move of hers would offend the crown prince completely? One could see him stomping quickly towards Su Luo, his long arm reaching out to pull her away with a tug. However, before he could even get close to Su Luo, suddenly, the tip of a sword flew towards his arms. The crown prince jumped back in fright. If he had insisted on going to pull Su Luo, then this arm would certainly be gone. The crown prince's line of sight pinned on Nangong Luoyan poisonously, before turning to glare at Su Luo. Get over here for this prince. You as such a fickle woman, still aren't ashamed yet? This line of his simply designated Su Luo as part of his own belongings. No matter how good Su Luo's temperament was, she was still infuriated by him. Not to mention, Su Luo's temper had never been good to begin with. One only saw the corners of her lips cocking up icily, as she threw a sidelong glance at the crown prince. Her voice became increasingly dismissive. Nangong Liujue, open up your dog eyes wide and see clearly. We have already broken our engagement, and no longer have any relationship, not even a little bit. So cease using your status as crown prince to disgust me. 1. It's been used many times in this story before, but it's a lot funnier when you know the words we replaced with eagerly is actually an intensifier that means jolting buttocks, like the shaking ass of a follower hurrying to keep up and please someone. So much humor is lost even when jolting buttocks is added. Sigh 2 Translator response by Nivrim. Chapter 350, Amethyst Thorned Island. 1. Nangong Liujue simply could not have imagined, originally, that meek like a kitten Su Luo, who had strived very hard again and again only to obtain one glance from him, would now use this kind of mocking tone and taunting manner to speak with him. Nangong Liujue furiously hollered. Loathsome girl, granted. Even if you are not this prince's legal imperial concubine, you also have to become my concubine on the side. You think you can escape from this? Why haven't you quickly crawled back to this king? Saying this, Nangong Liujue was about to go pull Su Luo again. Originally, he really didn't have any interest in Su Luo, but after hearing that this loathsome girl had unexpectedly and quietly cultivated to the 3rd rank, she was so gifted that it simply shocked people. Even more, she was someone Nangong Luoyan fancied. From childhood to adulthood, he and Nangong Luoyan had always been irreconcilable. Things that Nangong Luoyan wanted, he must grab it back. Even if he couldn't snatch it back, he must also destroy it. Nangong Liuyan's sword-like eyebrows knitted slightly. He faintly swept Nangong Liujue a glance. This glance appeared to be light as a cloud or gentle as a breeze, but was overcast with a bloody ruthlessness that threatened to vent its anger violently. This gave Nangong Liujue a severe cold feeling. The temperature was like being in an ice house. Bei Qining smiled faintly and raised an eyebrow. Oh, Nangong Liujue, how did our home sister-in-law become your concubine on the side? You still have the nerve to say this out loud. Also, why haven't you looked in the mirror to see what kind of revolting person you are? Bei Qining had always been merciless towards the crown prince, never giving him face. Nangong Liujue's complexion was ashen. He had choked back a breath and was just about to curse out loud when Lan Xian stole his thunder to get there first. Lan Xian put on a grown-up manner, hardening his face to lecture Nangong Liujue. You as a person are really something. The crown prince should have the poise and character of a crown prince. Look at our home Zanya, proper and impressive in appearance, elegantly poised. This is the demeanor of a proper crown prince. When you have time, learn to emulate him a little more. Nangong Liujue, a high and mighty crown prince, as a respected elder, was reprimanded like a little brother would be. He was infuriated to the point of snarling in rage at them. This time, he was cut off by a glance from Anya Ming. Want to continue being the crown prince smoothly and steadily? Then manage well your small piece of land. Extending your hand that far. Aren't you afraid of having it chopped off? These three people, each and every one of their background was not small. When speaking, each of them was fiercer and more poisonous than the other. They simply overwhelmed the crown prince, who was too weary to cope. With great difficulty, he waited until the three of them finished lecturing him in a row. Then the crown prince finally had a chance to glare at Su Luo in rage. I'm giving you one last chance. Are you going to follow this prince to walk away or not? Those three people, he could not afford to offend. But Su Luo was merely a tiny ant that he could pinch into a sphere or roll flat between his fingers. Unexpectedly, this tiny ant was already not that ant from the olden days. Now, her complexion was indifferent. The words she said were even more poisonous than the three of them added together. Nangong Liujiue, you think you are the crown prince. In my eyes, you are no better than a beggar. Want this lady to follow you? You're wishful thinking. In your dreams. Su Luo, the crown prince was ridiculed again, and was simply put in an awkward situation, unable to get out. Originally, he still believed that Su Luo would at least give him some face. He still thought that Su Luo at least cared about him from her old affections. Back then, as long as he gave her one glance, she would almost start to fly. Didn't expect, never expected. The crown prince's expression hazed over, and changed the topic of conversation with a mocking tone. Oh, this is because you bumped into a backer, full of confidence, right? You better not think he will marry you. You are merely someone he is toying with and nothing more. After this event, will you still be crying and calling, coming over to beg for this king? Nangong Luyan, who had been standing by the side since the beginning and hadn't talked, displayed a concentrated icy intent with his body. He was cold as frost, his dark red lips slowly hooking up. An ice-cold disdainfulness flashed through his eyes as he cast frosty side glances at the crown prince. You have an objection? Chapter 351, Amethyst-Thorned Island, 2. Even though it was only 4 short words, it was like the calm before the storm. The oppressive atmosphere stifled the words in the crown prince's heart. If you don't want to continue being the crown prince, then just say so. Don't beat around the bush like this. Nangong Liuyan's cold gaze looked sharply at the crown prince. His handsome face was saturated with a dense, murderous aura. His eyes were like frost, with his entire person appearing bloodthirsty, ruthless, cruel and stormy. Nangong Liujue was immediately choked off, looking like someone had very firmly squeezed his neck. No matter what, he couldn't speak. Bei Chening covered his lips, smiling happily as he said to the two people beside him. Actually, Nangong's words are incorrect. Guys, think about it. An incapable person as a crown prince is a good crown prince. Having such a crown prince in position, the person sitting as the emperor, how comfortable and happy he ought to be. You guys say, isn't it right? Lan Xian, who was always in cahoots with Bei Chening, pretended to be surprised and opened his eyes wide. Oh heavens, an incapable person sitting on the position? Who are you referring to? Is it this person in front of us? Lan Xian had a surprised tone with exaggerated movements. His voice was loud but just right. People within several tens of meters of his body could all hear him. In an instant, the crown prince's complexion became very red. So red that you could even squeeze water droplets out. The expression he used to glare at Lan Xian was practically itching to ruthlessly devour him. However, Bei Chening hadn't planned to let him go just yet, and continued with Lan Xian to play off of each other. Of course, otherwise, who else is there? This talk has already been widely spread throughout the entire Eastern Ling's capital. You are actually this ill-informed and ignorant. I order all of you to shut up. The crown prince's complexion was as black as the bottom of a pot. He coldly and gloomily glared at Su Luo, itching to strike her dead on the spot. It was all this loathsome girl. At that time, when he went to Su Manor to break off the engagement, this loathsome girl had misheard his words, and yelled it out loud in astonishment. Thus this matter about him was spread far and wide. Now the crown prince was very suspicious. That day, what the loathsome girl had yelled out Was it because she really misheard? Or did she do it on purpose? Consider you guys got this one. I will remember this treatment. By all means, don't end up in my hand otherwise. The crown prince coldly glared at Nangong Luyin and gave a few heavy humphs. He took along a group of subordinates and left grandiosely. The back of that person, no matter how you looked, seemed to cut a very sorry figure. Bei Qining smiled happily and said to Su Luo, "Sister-in-law, don't mind him. This crown prince is just like that. He lacks being scolded and cursed at. After being abused verbally a few times by others, he will be more straightforward. Otherwise, he won't be able to sleep at night." Seeing Bei Qining having an expression of being very knowledgeable about the crown prince, Su Luo felt it was extremely funny. "You are very blunt and rude to him. Naturally, every time we meet, he cannot do without me cursing him a few sentences. However, every time, he still laps it up and moves his face closer. You tell me if this person is worthless or not." Bei Qining smiled very self-satisfiedly and proudly. His smile was radiating with delight while he danced and gestured with joy. Nangong Luyin glanced at Su Luo with a considering look. Seeing her expression was calm, his red, translucent and moist lips smiled. His smile reached his eyes, making them seem intoxicatingly full of soft, yielding waves. He led her along by the hand. "Let's go hook some fish." "Okay." Su Luo also felt that her mood shouldn't be ruined by a mad dog that suddenly jumped out of nowhere. She flung her head and very quickly threw the crown prince out of her head. This group of people divided up the areas of Amethyst-Thorned Island. The best area on the island was divided into two, in the order of first come first served. The best places on the east side were occupied by the subordinates and powers that were affiliated with the crown prince. The so-called best spot was where people hooked the most amethyst-thorn fishes from the previous years. However, Nangong Luyin wasn't superstitious about this. He led Su Luo and walked towards the crag on the west side. According to their strength right now, if they wanted to snatch the position, naturally the crown prince's forces wouldn't be able to beat them. Only, Nangong Luyin was too lazy to bother to deal with the crown prince. Chapter 352, Amethyst-Thorned Island 3. The two of them sat on the rock rampart on the crag, with both legs dangling in midair. The breeze brushed by, swaying the ink-black strands of hair, giving off a hint of an especially indolent and idle appearance. Nangong Luyin took out a series of equipment and helped Su Luo set up her fishing rod properly. Hand in hand, he taught her how to fish for the amethyst-thorn fish. After Su Luo learned from his demonstrations, he sat in a place very close to Su Luo and started angling. Su Luo, full of interest, gazed fixedly at the fishing rod. This fishing rod's design was very peculiar. The dark-colored fishing rod was suffused with a faint gloss, emitting a spirit aura. Compared to the fishing rod from her previous life, it was simply as different as night and day. When fishing, it was not as simple as just carrying the fishing rod in hand. Rather, you must pour your spirit power into the fishing rod and carefully sense the situation on the seafloor. Then little by little, lure the amethyst-thorn fish to take the bait. In the beginning, Su Luo was still full of interest, and with single-minded devotion, poured her spirit power into the fishing rod to sense the world at the bottom of the ocean. After more than an hour had passed, she didn't even see a shadow of an amethyst-thorn fish, and lost some of the mood. She placed both hands under her chin, bored to death. She started to glance around at her surroundings in her boredom. No wonder An Yiming and Lan Xian made a vow of not wanting any amethyst-thorn fish she hooked. As it turned out, they already knew earlier that she would not be able to hook an amethyst-thorn fish. However, in more than an hour, Nangong Luyin already caught 5 fishes. An Yiming caught 3. Behind the two, Lan Xian and Bei Qining both caught 2. Only her, not to mention a fish, she couldn't even get her hands on a fish scale, truly embarrassing. Alas! Su Luo was bored senseless and started to complain to the little divine dragon through their mind link. Too embarrassing, too embarrassing, too embarrassing. The little divine dragon went a woo while thinking it over. All of a sudden, he extended his little paw and pointed at that deep pool of clear spirit spring That was to say, the legendary celestial spirit water. You are saying that by using the celestial spirit water, I will be able to hook an amethyst thorn fish? Su Luo asked, somewhat unconvinced. The little divine dragon opened its pair of huge eyes wide, cleverly nodded and stammeringly said, Fish, fish, food, food. The little divine dragon, who was trying to learn human dialect, was afraid that he wasn't clear, so finally, he flopped about on his belly acting out the motions of a fish being hooked. That comical and adorable little action simply made Su Luo so pleased and entertained that she uttered a light laugh. What happened? Not being able to hook a fish, and still in such a cheerful mood? Before, Nangong Luyan was still worried that this girl would be upset from not hooking a single amethyst thorn fish. But he didn't expect that her attitude was still this good. Quite able to amuse herself and be cheerful. Not able to catch a fish. Humph humph, all of you just wait to be shocked. Su Luo raised an eyebrow, smugly giving him a snort. With the help of the little divine dragon, she didn't believe she wouldn't be able to catch an amethyst fish. If she still couldn't hook a fish, she might as well drop the little divine dragon into the ocean as fish bait. Su Luo took advantage that people weren't watching, and noiselessly took out a few drops of celestial spirit water. Then, she secretly mixed it into the fish food. The fish food was originally a dark green color, that was then kneaded into little balls of dough. When you baited the hook, you took a little bit of it, and when Su Luo put in a little bit of celestial spirit water, it only made the fish food bait a little more moist. People at the side couldn't tell that there was any difference from before. This fish food was said to have been mixed personally by Nangong Luyan. The sources alone consumed a huge sum. If you didn't have few 10,000 gold coins, you absolutely could not make this fish food bait. Su Luo added the celestial spirit water into the fish food, and stirred it well again, before pinching it into little round balls to put on the fish hook. Her face carried hope, expectation and anticipation. Could or couldn't hook an amethyst thorn fish will all depend on this trick. Nangong Luyan saw her hook and laughed involuntarily. Where is there someone who fishes like you? The fish food bait is bigger than the mouth of an amethyst thorn fish. How can you catch a fish this way? However, before the smiling expression at the corner of Nangong Luyan's mouth could go down, the fish hook that Su Luo just cast moved slightly. Chapter 353, Amethyst Thorned Island 4. This meant that the fish took the bait. Su Luo's heart was pleasantly surprised again. She energetically lifted up the fishing rod, and lifted her eyes to look. She saw that on her fish hook was actually an awe-inspiring, dazzling, purple amethyst thorn fish. It was about the size of a palm, and the amethyst thorn fish looked similar to the crucian carp. Under the illumination of the sunlight, this amethyst thorn fish that was suspended above the water not only didn't swing about struggling to escape, on the contrary, it continued to nibble on the little round ball of fish food bait with great gusto. Su Luo used her strength and flung the rod. In a flash, she flung the amethyst thorn fish ashore. Afterwards, with her mood uplifted, she grabbed the little thing that was still refusing to let go of the fish food. Humans will die for riches, just as birds will for food. The little fish was the same. The amethyst thorned fish only now seemed to have recovered its senses, turning its body to look stupidly at the sea surface not far away. It then looked at the person that caught it, and immediately, it started to struggle nonstop. Su Luo, smiling happily, poked its little head. Oh, now you know to struggle? Too late. While speaking, she tossed this little amethyst thorned fish with teary and misty eyes into the wooden barrel. Didn't know if Beichening did it on purpose with his distribution of barrels, but he gave Nangong Luyan a huge wooden barrel, while the one arranged for her was one a child would use for playing house. That kind of small bucket. Even if you fill it up, the bucket was one that wouldn't be able to fit more than a few fishes. This was the first time that Su Luo hooked a fish. Naturally, she was a little excited. She gazed at that amethyst-thorned fish with an expression of simply loving it too much to part with it. Just when Su Luo was all smiles with elation and immensely proud of herself, and wanted to go tell Nangong Luyan the secret. Not far away, Nangong Liujue, escorted by a group of people, grandiosely walked over. The crown prince had his hand linked behind his back and coldly cast a sidelong glance at Su Luo. The corner of his mouth hooked up as he sneeringly said, "Oh, you really did actually catch an amethyst thorn fish. Amazing. I thought you wouldn't be able to catch a single one before this day comes to a close." Su Luo somewhat speechlessly swept this crown prince a glance. She really couldn't understand. She had already said everything very clearly. Why did he still come over to look and to be cursed at? Su Luo didn't feel like paying him any attention. She took out a small ball of fish bait and once again baited the fishhook. Nangong Liujue saw that Su Luo had actually ignored him. His heart became even more angry, and he gave a heavy cold snort. "Loathsome girl. It's now reached to this extent, and you are still pretending to be noble and virtuous. When the time comes, see how you will die." "Oh!" Su Luo unhurriedly cast him a glance, and her head lowered, as she continued to fiddle with the fish bait. The fish bait was a little too moist, so once she put it in place it would drop off. Looks like she needed to wait until it dried a little in the sun. You still don't know, right? That second older sister of yours, after returning to her teacher's school, Grandmaster Lan Hai had sent her all kinds of spirit elixir and pills like flowing water, non-stop. Before 1 month is over, she may advance to the 5th rank. At that time, you, a mere little 3rd rank, will still hope to defeat her? Life and death duel, life and death duel. It's to either live or die. You still think you can survive? The crown prince smiled complacently. The two misses from the Su family drawing up this life and death duel. It was spread abuzz throughout the entire imperial capital. Now there practically wasn't anyone who didn't know about it. Even though Su Luo stunned a lot of people by going from a good-for-nothing waste to a 3rd rank, yet nearly everyone was unanimously optimistic about Su Qing. Su Luo gave an "oh" sound in a light as a cloud and soft as the wind manner. Just like this, she had no other words for him. However, her heart was secretly on guard. She originally thought about it. Su Qing's cultivation could increase within a month. But she hadn't anticipated that Su Qing's teacher's sect would value her this much. The match after a month. Could she really win against her? Nangong Liujue saw Su Luo's lowered eyes in contemplation. Immediately, he was extremely happy. He raised an eyebrow and mockingly sneered at her. "Loathsome girl, now you are afraid, right?" Su Luo raised her eyes. Her gaze indifferently landed on his body, and she frowned slightly. The crown prince took the time to come over in his busy schedule. Was it just to inform me of this matter? Chapter 354, Amethyst Thorned Island 5. The implication being whether he was so idle that he came to look like a pain in the ass? The crown prince was immediately blocked by her, and he was choking on a sentence stuck in his throat. He just received the news a moment ago, so naturally, he would come over to taunt Su Luo. Originally, he thought she would be so scared by this news that all the color would bleach out of her face. In this way, he would have avenged his hatred from a moment ago, okay? But who could have imagined that this loathsome girl's mental strength was pretty good? The expression on her face didn't reveal her mood, nor did she seem to be distracted by the news. His gaze landed on that little wooden bucket near Su Luo, and suddenly, he was happy again. Fishing up to now and only hooking 1 amethyst thorn fish? You tell me, don't you think this is embarrassing? Nangong Liujue's face was full of disdain. Surveying this entire island, when it comes to hooking the least number and at the bottom, this position is yours exclusively. Really embarrassing. Seeing this crown prince in front of her always being arrogant and bossy to her, a light bulb turned on in Su Luo's head, and a split second later, an idea appeared. Wasn't Nangong Liujue disdainful of how few amethyst thorn fishes she had caught? Then, could she use this pretext to extort some stuff from him, making this crown prince die from heartache of the loss? Finished thinking, Su Luo gave Nangong Liuyan a light tug, stopping his slowly about to stand up figure. This was because under the circumstances of the crown prince continuing to provoke Su Luo, Nangong Liuyan's complexion had gradually darkened. He had the intent to move at any moment to dispose of him. Su Luo, with great difficulty, had caught this fat cow of a crown prince. How could she let this crown prince off so easily? Su Luo's smile was not quite a smile as she cast a sidelong glance at the crown prince. She lifted an eyebrow and said sarcastically, "You actually looked down on the number of amethyst-thorned fish I caught? Then, do you have the courage to engage in a contest with me? Let's see within a fixed time which one of us will catch the most number of amethyst-thorned fishes." How could the crown prince know that Su Luo had already found the trick to hooking the amethyst-thorned fish? In his eyes, it had taken this long for Su Luo to catch only one amethyst-thorned fish, and that's all. Also, it was so small there couldn't be another that was smaller. Therefore, Su Luo's words hit directly on the crown prince's intent, and he could be seen smiling coldly. "Loathsome girl, such big courage. You actually dare to compete with this prince." What, the always boasting that he is incomparably gallant crown prince this time became a coward? Su Luo directly used taunting methods to spur him into action. The corner of the crown prince's mouth evoked into a ridiculing sneer. "Loathsome girl. You ought to know that this prince has already hooked 3 amethyst-thorned fishes up until now. You only caught 1 fish. You sure you want to compete with this prince?" "Humph, I can be killed any time, but won't tolerate any insults. Could it be that you think I would be afraid of you?" Both of Su Luo's cheeks were round from fuming, giving off an appearance of being hot-blooded, easily cheated, and letting one's emotions make the decisions. Just now, Nangong Liujue was criticized by Bei Chening, and them too wretchedly. He thought that this would be a great opportunity to turn the tables on them. Su Luo's these words were right on the money with his intent, but on his face, he faked an expression of having been put into a difficult situation. "Humph, competing with you, wouldn't this prince have an unfair advantage?" Su Luo secretly looked down on him in her thoughts. She was the most adept at figuring out a person's heart. She could clearly see that the crown prince was obviously secretly extremely happy to do this, but still put on this kind of act to use all sort of excuses. Who were you trying to fool? Su Luo didn't bother to match his performance, and simply turned her body away, unwilling to acknowledge him. "Since it is like this, then it's fine not to compete. Your Highness the Crown Prince, please return." The Crown Prince wanted to use declining as a way to advance. Su Luo used the same maneuver of withdrawing to advance forward. This forced the Crown Prince to be flustered and unprepared. The Crown Prince didn't expect that Su Luo would not be drawn to the path he was leading her onto, and an ugly expression flashed through his eyes. But he was even more enraged, and one could see him give a cold snort. "Since you yourself insist on courting death, then this prince will help you accomplish this task. Want to compete? Then let's compete." Bei Chening usually was the one who loved spectacles the most, and was also the one who liked to bicker with the Crown Prince the most. One could see him holding an amethyst-thorned fish and leisurely walking over. Chapter 355, Amethyst-Thorned Island 6. Bei Chenying's fishing rod was swinging in a carefree manner over his shoulder, and started to talk with scorching satire and frigid irony. "Oh, who is pretending as if they are about to lose out? Nangong Liujue. If you have the ability, then don't bully women, and have a competition with me instead." When the Crown Prince saw Bei Chening, his temple pulsed fiercely. This person was simply his nemesis in this lifetime. Just seeing him meant nothing good would happen. The Crown Prince sent a resentful glance at Bei Chening. "Meddling in other people's business, take a hike to the side." Bei Chening was no longer cheerful. "This is my sister-in-law. What do you mean I am meddling in other people's business? Nangong Liujue. The person that needs to take a hike to the side ought to be you." Both of their remarks were not agreeable. Thus they started to quarrel noisily. Su Luo was simply dumbfounded watching this scene. One was the respectable and honorable crown prince of an empire. The other was the enigmatic president of the mercenary union. These two masters normally, in front of other people, appeared to be arrogant, condescending, aloof, and very high and mighty. To those people beneath them, both of their existences were eminent and unapproachable. Yet who could have anticipated that now, these two extremely honorable personages would quarrel noisily like immature kids? "You say one, I say two, and we're going at it quite energetically." Su Luo had just planned to ruthlessly swindle the Crown Prince in return. How could she look on helplessly and let the crown prince escape by turning around and leaving abruptly again? Consequently, she could only come to smooth things over. Okay, both of you stop quarreling. Beichen, first you take a moment to rest. Crown Prince, are we still having this competition? If we are not competing, then go away. Don't disturb my mood to fish. Because of you two's sound volume from noisy snarling and roaring, no matter how good the fish bait, it would not be able to hook an amethyst-thorned fish. Su Luo craftily winked at Bei Chening. Bei Chening had already experienced Su Luo's wit and intelligence. He nodded his head in complete understanding of her meaning, and cleverly crossed his arms to stand at the side. The crown prince saw that Bei Chening stopped quarreling naturally. He also knew when to stop. He gave a severe snort. Want to compete, then let's compete. But only this prince and you, the both of us will compete. Others are not allowed to interfere. Saying this, his gaze swept from Bei Chenying's to Nangong Liuyun's body. He loathed both these people, but couldn't help admitting that their strength was extraordinary. It was also because of their extraordinary strength that he loathed them even more. Su Luo faintly smiled. Then, what are the rewards and penalties for this competition? The crown prince thought about it suddenly, his mouth hooked into a sneer. How about this? Just use the amount of amethyst-thorn fish hooked to decide things. Whoever has more will win. As for the rewards and penalties, then the winning side will get the rewards. If the winning side hooks 10 amethyst-thorn fish, then the losing side will compensate the winner with 10 pieces of green-colored crystal stones and so on. 10 amethyst-thorn fish will be compensated with 10 green-colored crystal stones? Su Luo's heart was simply too excited. This idiotic crown prince simply did not know that she had a cheating tool placed in the fish bait, and actually stupidly set down this rule. This time, wouldn't he be scared to death of the compensation? Only Su Luo was afraid of revealing a clue. In a split second, her expression seemed somewhat hesitant. Nangong Liuyun smiled in an easygoing manner and rubbed Su Luo's head. Mere green-colored crystal stones. This king can still afford to lose. Go play without holding back. Implication being, if she lost, the penalty would be considered his to pay? Su Luo smilingly nodded her head towards him, and again coldly humphed towards the crown prince. Fine. It's decided just like this, but words are not good enough proof. We must draw up a written contract. The crown prince was still afraid that Su Luo would renege on the debt, so both people agreed easily. He ordered a servant to fetch brush, ink and paper. Then the paper was laid out on top of a large stone. Bei Chening, full of interest, acted as a witness. He then picked up the brush and started to write. At this moment, the writing done by the brush was like moving clouds and flowing water on top of the paper. The handwriting on the paper flowed smoothly and elegantly, delighting the eyes of the people watching. Chapter 356, Amethyst-Thorned Island 7. Bei Chening stopped the brush and self-satisfiedly lifted his chin. The written calligraphy is truly great. Simply want to collect it and don't let anyone see it. Su Luo was speechless. This child, as expected, was influenced by a different environment. He was the same as Nangong Liuyun, with no limit to their narcissism. Altogether, Bei Chening wrote 3 copies. One was given to Su Luo, another was given to the crown prince. In addition, the final copy was held by him as the witness, so as to avoid someone reneging and not acknowledging the debt. After the 3 people signed their own names, the competition could begin. 3 hours is the limit. Whoever hooks the most amethyst-thorn fish will be the winner. With a wave of Bei Chenying's hand, the competition officially started. In order to maintain the fairness, equality and the openness of the competition, Su Luo and Nangong Liuyun sat in the same place to fish. Everyone's fish bait was their own secret recipe mix. No one would inspect the other's fish bait. As long as it could hook an amethyst-thorn fish, then it's enough. Therefore, Su Luo fished with a clear conscience. Now not far away, Lan Xian was smiling and shaking his head. Oh dear, looks like this time, Nangong will bleed a huge amount. Lan Xian leisurely leaned back into his chair and switched to a more comfortable position, and his voice held a sigh. That girl is also really too headstrong. Don't know how Nangong fell just for her? An Yiming glared at him. If you don't want to wound the camaraderie among brothers, then don't speculate about her. Could it be that you couldn't tell that this time Nangong is really serious? Lan Xian's expression was lethargic. He cast a glance at the spectacle in the distance, and still crooned out a sentence. But I really can't see what characteristic that miss has that is fit to be with Nangong. You look at this matter she created. An Yiming paused a little, looking towards the azure sky in the distance. He looked at it for a long time before pensively saying one sentence. You think this time she will lose? Isn't it obvious? Lan Xian spread out both hands, and as expected said, Nangong Liujia. Although he looks annoying, he does not lack strength. Don't forget that last year, the number of amethyst thorn fish he hooked was second only to Nangong. How could the Su family's girl compete with him? It is simply attempting the impossible and asking for trouble, okay? Also, Nangong is really too much to actually still indulge her whim. An Yiming smiled faintly, his tone was mild. No, this time, I'm afraid you may have guessed wrong. You believe that girl can win? Lan Xian cast a laughable glance at An Yiming. I don't believe in her, but I do believe in Nangong. An Yiming said vaguely. Nangong's vision is usually the most accurate from childhood to adulthood. Have you ever seen him lose? That is true. But this time, maybe he outsmarted himself and fell into a hidden ditch, right? No matter what, Lan Xian did not believe that Su Luo could win. An Yiming only smiled indifferently, and didn't say anything more. He merely focused on the fishing rod. What he didn't tell Lan Xian was that he always felt that that girl was not that simple. Moreover, she was very mysterious, and the specifics were hard to say. However, speaking of Su Luo's side, the matter of the bet got around, and as a result, a lot of people approached and settled around them to see the result. However, compared to Su Luo, everyone was optimistic about the Crown Prince winning. Not only was the Crown Prince's martial arts cultivation ranked much higher than Su Luo's, the number of amethyst thorn fish that he had caught last year ought to speak for itself. His strength was out of the ordinary. This miss still doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, to actually dare to hammer on the table of the Crown Prince. This isn't considered much. The most interesting thing is their stake. How many amethyst thorn fish the winning side hooks. The losing side must compensate that many green-colored crystal stones. Hey, I'm afraid this miss will bleed a huge amount. Which family is this miss from? Why is it that I have never seen her before? Have you heard of Su Manor's good-for-nothing waste? Have you heard about the buzzing rumors that were recently spread of a life-and-death duel between sisters? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.